I walked slowly up the mountain path of the Qingyun sect, my dark green Taoist robes swaying with every step. My hand gripped the small, soft hand of a young girl. "Senior brother Ouyang, how much further is it?" the girl panted. Her delicate doll-like face was covered in sweat, and her cheeks were puffed out like a little squirrel. I stopped and looked up at the sun, doing some mental math. "Don't worry," I said calmly. "At this pace, we'll definitely reach the foot of our peak by tomorrow evening." Tomorrow evening? Her face went pale. She let out a huff and plopped right down on the ground, refusing to move another inch. The mountain path ahead twisted and turned into the distance, looking like it would never end. Seeing her playing dead on the stone steps, I sat down beside her. I took the opportunity to study my new little junior sister. In my eyes, a translucent panel appeared next to her, a screen only I could see. Name, Hututu. Species, nine-tailed celestial fox, juvenile. Cultivation, 5th level golden core. Roots, 10. Charm, 7, underage. Luck, 8. Music talent, 10. Exclusive skill, alluring presence, locked. Evaluation, a top-tier beast-eared girl who hasn't reached adulthood yet. I felt a surge of joy. Compared to the rebellious brats back on the mountain, a normal beast-eared girl was finally joining us. Her name was Hututu, and she had just arrived at the Qingyun sect today. My master, whom I hadn't seen for a year, had dropped her off, given me a quick instruction, and bolted as if he were escaping a disaster. Part of me wanted to see what the old man was up to. The other part wanted to see when this girl would show her foxtail. I knew from the first glance she wasn't human. She was a spirit fox with a natural Dao body. It was impossible to miss with that golden attribute panel floating there. If the news got out that my master, a peak master of the Qingyun sect, had taken a fox demon as a disciple, it would be the biggest scandal in the cultivation world. "Senior brother, what are you looking at?" Tutu snapped, glaring at me. She clearly thought I lacked grace. I looked decent enough, but I hadn't used a flying sword or even a simple wind spell to help her walk. We had been hiking for 2 hours, and I hadn't shown her a shred of pity. She looked at me with growing suspicion. I could almost see the gears turning in her head. She probably thought I was some kind of creep who liked little kids. She was the princess of the Fox clan. After all, even at 5, she was a beauty in the making. Tutu's gaze turned guarded. She curled her hands into fists against her chest like a protective hamster. "Senior brother, I'm asking you, what are you looking at?" I coughed awkwardly and pulled my gaze away. My mind was racing. My master's surname was Hu. This girl's surname was also Hu. Was she his secret daughter? Had the old man actually seduced a fox? That was intense, even for him. I couldn't help but feel a bit of admiration. My master was known as the greatest playboy in the cultivation world. I often had to clean up his messes with his various mistresses. If those women found out he had a secret child, they'd probably beat his brains out. A wicked grin threatened to break across my face. I had some serious leverage now. I could almost hear myself saying, "Master, you wouldn't want the mistresses to find out about this, would you?" I quickly masked my excitement with a warm, brotherly smile. "Junior sister, you're new here. I'm just showing you the ropes so you don't get lost when you go to lectures later." Tutu shook her head. "Master already told me everything. He said the Qingyun sect is one of the 9 great immortal sects. It has over 1,000 inner disciples and 100,000 outer disciples. It spans 72 peaks and covers 100,000 kilometers. He said only those with immense talent and luck can even make it into the outer sect." She rattled off the facts like a textbook. I blinked, stunned. Was the Qingyun sect really that prestigious? I thought any random dog could get in. Back when I first crossed over into this world, my master had literally begged me in tears to be his disciple. I'd thought he was a traveling scammer. I had planned to tell her which peaks were full of idiots and where to find free food, but I decided to keep my mouth shut. "Right," I said, clearing my throat. "That's exactly what I was going to say. Since you know the basics, let's talk about our specific peak." Tutu perked up, listening intently. I held up a finger, my expression dead serious. "On our mountain, besides the old man, I am the boss." Tutu stared at me, looking like she'd misheard. "You follow me, and my word is law," I continued. "As for the other disciples on the peak, stay away from them. They're all mentally ill." I felt a pang of regret. I hadn't established my authority when the others first arrived, and now I had zero respect as the eldest brother. It seems senior brother has a very deep prejudice against us. A gentle voice drifted from behind me. It sounded kind, but the tone was ice-cold. My body froze. I turned around slowly, a forced, awkward smile plastered on my face. Standing right there was a young man in Taoist robes. My heart sank. I managed to squeeze out a weak smile. "Oh, hey there, little bai," I said, trying to sound casual. "Out for a hike? What a coincidence." Standing across from me was my junior brother, Bai Feiyu. Just like with Tutu, a status panel floated in my vision. Name, Bai Feiyu. Identity, reincarnation of an ancient sword immortal. Cultivation, 5th level of foundation establishment. Root bone 9. Charisma, 10+1. Luck, 1. Talent, 10+1. Exclusive skill, everything is my sword. Evaluation, a peerless sword immortal in the making, a monster among men. Every time I saw his stats, I felt a pang of jealousy. This guy was clearly the protagonist of his own story. With stats like that, he was destined for greatness, even if his luck stat was a bit pathetic. Tutu's eyes lit up the moment she saw him. Bai Feiyu was incredibly handsome, with sharp eyebrows and eyes that sparkled like stars. He wore a snow-white robe and stepped lightly, as if he were walking on clouds. A 3-foot-long sword hung at his waist. Standing there in the mountain breeze, he looked like a celestial being who had just descended from the heavens. So handsome, Tutu whispered, her eyes wide. Her 5-year-old heart was clearly doing backflips. Compared to her scrub of a big brother, this guy was the real deal. Bai Feiyu didn't look at her, though. He kept his eyes on me, smiling. It was a gentle smile, but I felt like 1,000 invisible flying daggers were shooting out of his pupils, trying to pin me to the rock wall. This is the new junior sister master brought back. Her name is Tutu. Tutu, this is your 4th senior brother, Bai Feiyu. Brother? He's really my brother? Tutu stammered, starstruck. Tutu loves brothers the most. She looked like she'd been wrapped in warm cotton candy. A creepy, satisfied grin spread across her 5-year-old face, looking more like a 30-year-old auntie daydreaming about a handsome husband. Bai Feiyu finally turned his gaze toward her. His brow furrowed. With his sword immortal eyes, there was no hiding the truth from him. "What is Master thinking?" Bai Feiyu said, his voice cold. "Bringing back a fox." I lunged forward and slammed my hand over his mouth before he could finish the word. Master said not to mention her identity in front of her. I hissed into his ear. "Her name is Tutu. Master's name is Yun. Get it?" Bai Feiyu's eyes widened. He looked at me in shock. "Both named Hu?" He probably thought Master had captured a fox demon to help his cultivation, or worse, that she was Master's secret love child. I could see the gears turning in his head, wondering if the cultivation world had really gotten this scandalous while he was busy reincarnating. He swatted my hand away and looked at Tutu with a complicated expression. "Since you've joined the sect, practice hard," he said flatly. "And stay away from the eldest brother. He's mentally ill." He sounded like a grumpy old man trapped in a teenager's body. Tutu, being a spirit fox, was sensitive to emotions. She could feel that this handsome brother didn't like her. She looked dejected. Did he hate her because she was pretty? Or was he like those handsome uncles back at Green Hill who only ever hung out with each other and ignored the girls? "Hey, she's just a kid. Don't be so serious," I said, reaching out to pinch Bai Feiyu's cheek to force a smile onto his face. Bai Feiyu moved like lightning. He grabbed my wrist and flipped me, pinning me against the stone wall. "Ow, ow, ow. You brat," I yapped. "I'm your eldest brother. Show some respect." Tutu watched us, a look of realization dawning on her face. She thought she understood now. He wasn't being cold because he hated her. He was just worried she'd steal my attention. This sect was definitely full of weirdos. Bai Feiyu finally let me go after I begged for mercy. I rubbed my sore shoulder, wincing. "Why are you down here anyway?" I asked. "Did you come to welcome us?" Bai Feiyu shook his head. "Today is the day the sect leader gives his lecture. I have to go. He's annoyed with our peaks attendance record. He says if we skip again, or if we refuse to participate in next month's sect competition, he'll kick us and Master out of the sect." That old fossil? I rolled my eyes. All he does is drone on about the Tao until he falls asleep himself. Who cares if he kicks us out? Besides, I have leverage. Someone recorded him getting kicked out of the Jade Maiden Peak last week, and they sent the footage to me. You can see the boot print on his face perfectly. Bai Feiyu nodded slowly. He knew I had social butterfly syndrome. I had friends and informants across all 72 peaks of the Qingyan sect. If I had dirt on the sect leader, we were safe. Bai Feiyu was at a critical stage of polishing his sword hard, a level of perfection he hadn't reached in his previous life. He didn't want to waste time on boring lectures. Ever since he joined 5 years ago, I'd been a constant distraction, testing his patience and ruining his calm meditation. But deep down, he enjoyed it. It let him experience the youth he'd missed out on as a cold immortal. I'm going back then, Bai Feiyu said, his face returning to its usual calm. Wait a second, I said, my playful expression vanishing instantly. Wait, I called out as Bai Feiyu turned to leave. Something else? He asked, stopping in his tracks. I gave him a flattering smile. I heard your flight technique has reached a new level lately. How about letting your big brother see some of that skill? Bai Feiyu looked at me with a half-smile. See my skill? Or do you just want to ride? He paused, eyes glinting. Oh, I forgot. Senior brother is still in the chi refining stage. You can't fly on a sword yet, can you? My face turned bright red. I coughed to hide my embarrassment. I'm not weak. I just choose not to level up. Besides, shouldn't fellow disciples help each other out? I started swaying my head like a scholar reciting poetry. A ride is a ride, whether you're a brother or a... Before I could finish, the 3-foot sword at Bai Feiyu's waist transformed into a streak of light. It whistled through the air. Bai Feiyu lunged toward me while I was still busy acting smart. I jumped back in a panic. You brat, are you trying to kill your senior brother? I barely dodged him. Bai Feiyu didn't stop. He grabbed Hututu's hand and leaped onto the flying sword. Hututu let out a high-pitched scream as the sword turned into a green rainbow, streaking toward the distant peaks. Bai Feiyu's voice echoed back through the valley. If you aren't back by sunset, senior brother, we aren't saving any dinner for you. I watched them disappear, fuming. Damn it, I need to reclaim my dignity as the eldest senior brother. I started the long, grueling trek up the mountain path on foot. As I climbed, a familiar sound chimed in my head. Asterisk ding. Host's AFK rewards have arrived. Asterisk. Reward, 1,000 true chi points. I sighed and reluctantly accepted the reward. A faint warmth flowed from my stomach to my limbs before vanishing. I pulled up my status panel with a thought. Name, Ouyang. Identity, Transmigrator. Cultivation, Chi Refining Level 9. Bone Structure, 1. Charm, 6. Luck, 1. Special Talent, none. True Chi Value, 906,962,543. Exclusive Skills, Locked. Evaluation, you are the worst host I have ever carried. This was my cheat, the ultimate AFK system. As long as I stayed perfectly still, the system would kick in. I'd gain massive amounts of true chi just by lying around. The downside? I had to be a literal statue. No moving, no talking, nothing. When I first arrived and awakened this system, I hated it. I had the ego of a transmigrator. I wanted to reach the peak of the world using my own genius and modern knowledge. I swore I'd rather jump off a cliff than use a salted fish system like this. But now, it felt great. One day of hard training didn't even match 10 minutes of being AFK. I used to tell myself I wasn't a parasite. I just liked napping. Now, I'll admit it. I'm a total cheater. However, there was a major catch. I couldn't level up. The cultivation ranks in this world were standard. Chi Refining, Foundation Establishment, Golden Core, and so on. 9 major realms, each with 9 layers. But after I hit the 9th layer of Chi Refining, I got stuck. My cultivation stayed there forever. I suspected it was the system's fault. Even if my true chi was slightly stronger than a normal chi refiner, I was still just a chi refiner. I couldn't condense my chi into liquid essence, let alone form a golden core. I went from a genius who hit level 9 overnight to a trash who couldn't break through. In this world, life only truly begins at Foundation Establishment. That's when you get the cool treasures and the divine techniques. I was standing right at the door, but the door was locked and the key was missing. My true chi amount had grown to a terrifying number, but it was just a number. It didn't matter how high it went if I couldn't fly. Sword flight is a foundation establishment skill. My dream of soaring through the clouds was dead. A cultivator who can't fly with a beautiful girl in his arms has no soul. The other problem was my lifespan. Chi refining locks your looks at 18, but you only live about 200 years. Compared to masters who live for millennia, I was on a timer. If I didn't break through, I'd be dead in 2 centuries. I shook my head to clear the dark thoughts. I reached into my robe and pulled out a yellow talisman. This was a haste talisman from my third junior brother, Chinchangshan. I tore it open and injected a bit of chi. The talisman burned into a spark, and a golden light wrapped around my legs. I felt a surge of energy. Forget the future, I muttered. Dinner is more important. I sprinted up the mountain like a madman. By sunset, I finally reached the summit of our small peak. A modest, square courtyard sat there. I wiped sweat from my brow, straightened my messy robes, and pushed the door open. In the center of the yard stood a massive tree. Bai Feiyu was standing on a branch, his back to the setting sun. His white robes fluttered in the breeze. He looked like an immortal who had fallen from the heavens. Hututu was curled up in a chair below, staring at him with stars in her eyes. Always posing, I thought bitterly. Only monkeys spend all day in trees. Suddenly, the scent of food hit my nose. I grinned. Perfect timing. I walked over to the table under the tree, pulled out a chair, and plopped down next to Hututu. I reached out and gave Hututu a sharp flick on the forehead. Stop staring, I said. Looking good doesn't put food on the table. Big brother, that hurts. Hututu cried out, clutching her fluffy head and glaring at me with watery eyes. Just as she was about to pounce on me, a young man with a simple, honest face walked out of the kitchen carrying a tray of food. When he saw me, he gave a humble smile. Big brother, you're back, he said. Dinner just finished. I stood up and walked over, grinning as I took the tray from him. Changsheng, my man. What's on the menu? Did you stew that 3-eyed spirit chicken I swiped from the Spirit Beast Peak? I did, he replied quickly. And didn't you mention second brother is at a critical point in his breakthrough? I wouldn't dare forget your instructions. He spoke with extreme caution, his expression almost fearful. I didn't mind. This was just how Chinchangshan was. No matter how many times I told him to relax, he couldn't change. I gestured toward Hututu. That's our new junior sister. Did Little Bai introduce you yet? We've greeted each other, Changxing said with a sigh of admiration. Master's eye for talent is as sharp as ever. Even with Master not around, his voice was full of genuine reverence. If I couldn't see his character panel, I would have actually believed he was just a simple, honest kid. I blinked, and his stats appeared in my mind. Name, Chinchangshan. Identity, Reincarnator. Cultivation, Golden Core, 3rd layer. Root Bone, 8. Charm, 9. Luck, 7. Formation Talent, 10+1. Exclusive Skill, Living Puppet Technique. Evaluation, a high-level old fox, reincarnator with severe persecution mania. That's right. This junior brother of mine was from the future. I thought Bai Feiyu being an ancient sword immortal was crazy enough, but being a reincarnator was even more absurd. Apparently, he died so miserably in his past life that he woke up in this one terrified of everything. I suddenly reached out and pinched Changxing's cheek. Junior brother, the you standing here right now? It isn't a puppet, is it? With a formation talent of 11, his puppets could even fool my system. Changxing's body stiffened. He took a subtle step back, a forced smile on his face. How could that be, big brother? I'm in my own home. Why would I use a puppet? The moment he said that, I knew. This was definitely a puppet. His paranoia had clearly gotten worse. Hurry up and set the table, I muttered. Changxing excused himself and hurried back to his room. Big brother, Hututu whispered, leaning in close. That brother is weird. He doesn't have the scent of a living person. And even though I just looked at his face, I've already forgotten what he looks like. Don't worry about it, I said, dismissive. He's a bit strange, but he's got a good personality. Just remember one thing. On this peak, you can provoke anyone you want, but never mess with your third brother. Hututu nodded, though she didn't look convinced. I'm serious, I added. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died. The hair on her neck stood up. She had felt it too. Even though they were both in the golden core stage, Her instincts told her that if they fought, she'd be dead in a heartbeat. Despite her powerful bloodline, she immediately moved Chen Chongqing to the top of her most dangerous people list. Suddenly, Bai Feiyu leaped down from the tree. He glanced at the closed door nearby. Is second brother still in seclusion? Probably, I said, tossing a chicken leg into Hututu's bowl. He said he had a new insight into the way of the sword. He's been in there for 3 days. Bai Feiyu hummed in response, but his gaze stayed fixed on that door. Even as a former sword immortal, he felt a crushing sense of pressure from a teenager. If Bai Feiyu was a genius born for the sword, then our second brother was the reason the sword existed in the first place. As we started eating, a piercing light suddenly tore through the roof of the side room. A pillar of sharp, silver sword intent shot into the sky, lighting up the darkening horizon like a beacon. Sword intent. Bai Feiyu's chopsticks clattered to the table. He stared in shock. He was still tempering his sword heart, yet our second brother had already grasped his own unique sword intent at such a young age. That was a feat usually reserved for masters in the soul manifestation stage. Hututu curled into a ball, shivering under the pressure. I just took a sip of my chicken soup and smacked my lips. This three-eyed spirit chicken really was top tier. No wonder those guys at Spirit Beast Peak guarded them so closely. I looked at the debris falling from the sky and sighed. Lung Ching Song. I yelled toward the room. You brat. You're fixing that roof tomorrow. That's the 3rd time this month. A moment later, a youth dressed in black stepped out, clutching a sword to his chest. He was surrounded by a murderous aura that made my skin crawl. His breathing was ragged, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at me, gave a stiff nod, and grunted a single word. I looked at him, feeling a massive headache coming on. This was my second junior brother, Lung Ching Song. He was the biggest troublemaker on the mountain. Name, Lung Ching Song. Identity, Son of Destiny, Protagonist. Cultivation, Golden Core, 7th layer. Root Bone, 10+1. Charm, 10. Luck, 10. Sword Talent, 10+1. Exclusive Skill, I am the sword. Evaluation, a son of destiny with a slight case of social anxiety. The heavenly protagonist. Every time I saw his stats, I wanted to curse. Some people are born in Rome. Others are born as the cattle pulling the wagon. It was enough to make a man die of envy. But this was the kid I raised with my own 2 hands. I remembered it like it was yesterday. Right after I got my system, I found Lung Ching Song wandering as an orphan. One look at his stats and I decided right then, I was adopting this kid. Sticking close to the protagonist was the only way to survive. Back then, I was 5 and he was 3. We survived on the streets together until we met our master, Hu Yun. That old man had practically cried, begging the 2 of us to be his disciples. I still remember the look on his face. I remembered it like it was yesterday. 5-year-old me and 3-year-old Lung Ching Song were crouched in a field, stuffing our faces with sweet potatoes we'd just stolen. Suddenly, an old man descended from the sky like a literal immortal. It was our current master, Hu Yun. He looked at us with a sage-like expression and said, "Little friends, destiny has brought us together. Would you like to be my disciples?" I didn't even blink. I said no. I had a system and I was looking after a literal son of destiny. I wasn't about to let just any random guy become our master. Hu Yun was stunned. He hadn't expected a 5-year-old to reject him so flatly. Lung Ching Song just hid behind me, eyeing the old man with suspicion. "I beg you," Hu Yun said, looking at me with total sincerity. "Let your brother be my disciple." I looked up at him, testing the waters. "What about me, Taoist? I can guarantee you'll grow up to be a wealthy, successful man in the secular world," he promised, patting his chest. "I want to cultivate immortals too." I snapped back. Hu Yun looked a bit pained. "Compared to your brother, you're really better off just being a rich guy." "If you don't take my brother, I'm not going," Lung Ching Song said. It was the longest sentence he had ever spoken. It was early autumn back then. That was the day we both became Hu Yun's disciples and started our journey. When we finally arrived at the Qingyun sect, even the sect master was alerted. He wasn't there for me, of course. He was there for my little brother. Lung Ching Song's talent was so terrifying that the sect master tried to snatch him away as a direct disciple. But Lung Ching Song refused again. He hid behind my back and spoke his second ever long sentence. Wherever my brother is, I am. I felt so proud of my little social anxiety-ridden brother in that moment. The sect master left the mountain feeling like he'd lost a priceless jade, while our master just laughed like a maniac. Back in the present, I snapped out of my memories. Lung Chingsong was already sitting at the table, clutching his sword. He started wolfing down food like he hadn't eaten in weeks. His murderous sword intent hadn't fully faded yet, and it was vibrating through the courtyard. Across from him, Hututu was shaking like a leaf. The pressure coming off Lung Chingsong was overwhelming. To her, my second brother didn't just look scary. He looked like someone who could erase her from existence with a flick of his wrist. Is the human world always this dangerous? She must have been thinking. I don't think I'm going to make it home alive. Beside her, Bai Feiyu's expression was heavy. He was staring at Lung Chingsong, clearly shaken. He was a reincarnated ancient sword immortal, yet this teenager was giving him this much pressure? He looked like he'd just realized he needed to work a lot harder. Lung Chingsong didn't notice any of this. His eyes lit up when he saw the three-eyed flower chicken. He reached out to grab a leg, but I whacked his hand with my chopsticks. Did you wash your hands? I frowned. Don't just sit down and grab food. He pulled his hand back and obediently went to wash up. When he came back, I noticed Tutu was still trembling. This is your second senior brother, Lung Chingsong, I told her gently. He's my brother. Don't let the scary look fool you. He's actually surprisingly gentle. I wasn't lying. Even though he looked like a cold-blooded killer, I knew him better than anyone. He was just socially awkward. Tutu forced a tiny, terrified smile. Lung Chingsong looked at her, tilted his head, and grunted a single word. Fox. Fox what? Eat your food. I barked, stuffing a chicken leg into his mouth to shut him up. After dinner, everyone retreated to their rooms. I spent the next 10 minutes yelling at Lung Chingsong to get out of my room and stop trying to drag his blankets onto my bed. In her own room, Hututu collapsed onto her bed, feeling completely overwhelmed. Everything that had happened today was way outside her expectations. She remembered her grandfather's warning before she left. He told her that as a heavenly Tao body, no one would see her true form, but she must never reveal her identity as a spirit fox or she'd be killed. She lay there, her face scrunched up like a bitter melon. She had a mission to complete, but after just one day, the pressure from these humans was crushing her. If one tiny mountain peak was full of monsters like this, how could the demon race ever hope to compete with the humans? The next morning, Tutu woke up early, still worrying about the future of her race. When she stepped outside, she saw Bai Feiyu standing on top of a tree. Faint purple lights swirled around him like snakes, making him look both righteous and strangely eerie. Senior brother Bai is as handsome as ever, she thought. Then she saw Lung Chingsong. He was shirtless, carrying a massive tree trunk over his shoulder. His physique looked like it had been carved from stone, his skin glistening with sweat and morning dew. Tutu stared, her heart fluttering. Okay, maybe the terrifying second brother is actually kind of perfect. Lung Chingsong dropped the massive log. With a sharp whistle, an ancient sword flew out of his room and into his hand. He took a breath, his eyes turning cold. In a flash of light, his sword blurred. A second later, the sword was back in his hand, and the massive log had been sliced into perfect, uniform planks. Amazing swordplay. Tutu cheered. Lung Chingsong glanced at her, then wordlessly started picking up the planks. Second senior brother, what are you doing? She asked, stepping closer with a sweet smile. Lung Chingsong put a nail in his mouth, balanced a plank in one hand, and held a hammer in the other. He gave her a two-word answer. Fixing roof. Tutu blinked, then remembered. Yesterday, when he broke through his cultivation level, he'd blown the entire roof off the house. I told him he had to fix it today. She watched as the man who looked like a god of death just a moment ago hopped onto the roof with a pile of wood, looking like a common carpenter. The rhythmic clinking of a hammer on wood echoed across the peak. Lung Chingsong had gone from a peerless sword immortal to a rooftop carpenter without a hint of hesitation. It was strange to see. He was a golden core cultivator with a killing intent that could freeze blood, yet he obeyed me, his seemingly ordinary senior brother, without question. Hututu stood there, her mouth hanging open in confusion. Before she could process it, Bai Feiyu walked out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a rag. He caught her staring and gave her a warm smile. "Morning, junior sister," he said. "The millet porridge is almost ready. Why don't you help me bring the bowls out?" Tutu shook her head to snap out of her daze and followed him in. She felt a strange vibe from Bai Feiyu, like his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, but she figured a senior brother wouldn't hurt her for no reason. She rolled up her sleeves and stepped up beside him. "Senior brother, what can I do to help?" she asked. Bai Feiyu looked at her, a strange, unreadable light flickering in his eyes. "Just grab the utensils and carry them out," he said softly. As she hopped away to grab the chopsticks, Bai Feiyu watched her back. The light in his eyes grew intense. This girl was the future nine-tailed sky fox, the empress of 10,000 demons. Now, she was his junior sister. He wondered if his rebirth had changed the timeline that much. He had a secret no one else knew. He had come back from the future. He had spent over a decade struggling in a post-apocalyptic wasteland before dying. And this time, he was determined to reach the top. He wouldn't lose anything again. He just had to stay low, keep a cool head, and stay close to the monsters surrounding him on this mountain. "Senior brother, something smells burnt," Tutu said, sniffing the air. Bai Feiyu jumped. "Oh no, the porridge." He grabbed a long spoon and started stirring frantically, but the smell of char filled the kitchen. He frowned. He reached out a finger and lightly touched the surface of the burnt porridge. A faint black light flashed. When he pulled his hand back, his fingertip was completely charred and blackened. He stared at the dead finger. This puppet body was getting old. He'd have to upgrade it soon. Then, he did something horrifying. Without a word, he snapped the charred finger off, tucked it into his sleeve, and pulled out a brand new finger. He clicked it into place like a toy. A few minutes later, we were all sitting at the table. Tutu held a large steamed bun in both hands, her eyes darting between Lung Chingsong on the roof and the others. "Third senior brother," she whispered to Bai Feiyu. "Who do you think is more handsome? Second brother or fourth brother?" Bai Feiyu paused his chopsticks. He considered himself a 10 out of 10 in the looks department, even if he rarely showed his true face to outsiders. "They're both handsome," he said with a calm smile. "Just like me." Tutu looked at his plain, average face and burst out laughing. "You're funny, senior brother. You're handsome too." Bai Feiyu smiled back, but his mind drifted. He remembered when he first joined the sect. I had been sitting on a rock, acting like a bum, when I reached out and playfully snatched the mask off his face. I had laughed and told him he was a good-looking kid who shouldn't hide behind a mask. That memory felt like it was bathed in golden sunlight. "Third brother? Why are you spacing out again?" Tutu asked, chewing her bun. He snapped back to reality and chuckled. "I was just wondering if eldest brother is awake yet. Let me tell you, Tutu, don't ever mess with him before he's had his morning tea." Tutu put her bun down, looking serious. "I'm not trying to be rude, but do you guys really think he's the eldest brother? He's only at the 9th level of chi refining. For his age, that's okay for a normal person, but compared to geniuses like you, he's, well, ordinary. Why do you all follow him?" Bai Feiyu's smile vanished. He looked her dead in the eye, his expression turning stone cold. "Lin Yuan is our eldest brother. He is the only one. Even if he wanted to become the sect leader of the entire Qingyun sect tomorrow, none of us would object." Tutu shrunk back, startled by his intensity. Inside, Bai Feiyu added a silent vow. "No matter what happens, I will protect him with my life." Suddenly, the entire peak erupted in purple light. Radiant clouds surged from the rising sun, flooding the mountain. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth went wild, swirling into golden lotus flowers that drifted through the air. The sound of the great Tao echoed like a divine choir across the sky. It was a heavenly phenomenon. Someone was reaching enlightenment. Bai Feiyu stood up instantly, his body glowing with a sharp, clear light. He activated the hidden formations around the peak, masking the vision from the outside world so the mountain looked normal to any prying eyes. On a nearby branch, Lung Chingsong opened his eyes. Purple light swirled in his pupils. His sword intent was so dense it felt like the very air had turned into blades. The grass, the trees, the bricks under our feet, everything hummed like a sharpened sword. "All things are my blade," Lung Chingsong whispered. Thousands of invisible swords screamed in response. The sky churned with yellow mist, and the sound of drums and harps thundered through the clouds. Even the heavens were answering his call. Up on the roof, the carpenter stopped his hammer mid-swing. He looked up at the sky, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. I watched as Lung Chingsong looked toward Bai Feiyu, his eyes burning with an intense will to fight. Their paths were polar opposites. Bai Feiyu followed the way of the myriad blades, but Chingsong had rejected that path. He didn't believe everything in the world was a sword. He only believed in the blade in his hand. He believed in himself. Bring it. Bai Feiyu laughed heartily. He transformed into a streak of white light, charging straight at Lung Chingsong. He had just entered the golden core stage, and his sword heart was finally perfect. He needed a grand battle to vent the soaring pride in his chest. One black streak, one white. They collided hundreds of times in the blink of an eye. They didn't even use their sword intent, only pure technique. If they had unleashed their full power, this entire peak would have been leveled. Even though they were only at the golden core stage, either one of them could easily slay a nascent soul cultivator. If you can't kill enemies levels above you, can you even call yourself a genius? The sky rang with the thunderous clashing of steel, dense as a collapsing star. Below them, Hututu stared up, trembling. The mere pressure leaking from their casual strikes made her body go stiff. She couldn't even look at the blinding sword chi. Is this really the golden core stage? She screamed internally. Asterisk, they're more terrifying than the great demons in my clan. Grandpa, this isn't the same golden core I have. Asterisk. Meanwhile, Chen Changsun was glowing with green light, struggling to maintain the mountain's formations. To his arrays, the invisible sword intent clashing above was like a tsunami hitting a sandcastle. He cursed under his breath, desperate to keep the other peaks from noticing the chaos. Hold it together. Don't push it. You two idiots, he grumbled. Sword cultivators were always like this. Once they got excited, they forgot everything else. Just as Changsun's strength was flagging, a roar erupted from the main house. It's the middle of the night. Will you let a man sleep? It was my voice. As I stepped out, the heavenly phenomena froze. A wave of true chi surged from my room like a tidal wave, instantly shattering the golden mists and divine clouds. The sky cleared in a second. All the music and visions vanished. The shockwave hit Bai Feiyu and Lung Chingsong like a physical blow, sending them flying. They tumbled through the air and crashed somewhere outside the peak's borders. I walked out with my eyes bloodshot, clothes messy, and hair disheveled. I was fuming. I grabbed a folded paper fan and waited. When the two of them finally flew back to the peak, I didn't give them a chance to speak. An invisible force snatched them out of the air, dragging them down to the dirt. I marched up and started whacking them both over the head with my paper fan. Asterisk whack. Whack. Asterisk. You think you're capable, huh? Tearing down the house wasn't enough. Now you want to tear down the whole mountain? If the house is gone, you can both sleep in the street. Lung Chingsong was used to this. He stood there like a stone, letting me spray him with spit as I scolded him. Bai Feiyu, despite his newly perfected sword heart, just smiled. My words went in one ear and out the other. Hututu watched me, her jaw dropping. She had been paralyzed by their power, yet I had blown them away with a single shout. She looked at me, then back at them. Was I really just at the 9th level of chi refinement? She remembered what Changsun said, that if I wanted to be sect leader, no one would object. Now, she didn't have any objections either. Once my morning grumpiness subsided, I sighed. Scolding was scolding, but we still had to eat. I sent them off to breakfast. After the meal, life returned to normal. Lung Chingsong went back to fixing the roof. Bai Feiyu climbed back into his tree to meditate. Chen Changsun headed down the mountain to reinforce his formations. That left me and Hututu. She looked miserable, standing by my side as I packed my gear. Since arriving yesterday, she had been constantly shocked. The monsters on this peak were too much for her. Even her status as a once-in-3 millennium genius felt like a joke now. Big brother, she whispered, her ears drooping. Am I really stupid? Am I a waste? I stopped packing my shovel and looked at her. I reached out and rubbed her fuzzy little head. Silly child, how could you be stupid? She gave a small, goofy giggle and hugged my leg. She had thought I was a creep at first, but now she felt a strange sense of peace around me. I smelled like bamboo, just like her home back in the mountains. Tutu likes Big Brother the best, she chirped. I picked her up and plopped her into the bamboo basket on my back. Let's go. From today on, you're part of our peak. Come help me gather herbs. I'm the best at finding spirit herbs, she shouted, full of energy again. I carried her toward the back of the mountain. Our sect, the Qingyun sect, occupied 72 peaks, but only 12 were open to the public. The other 60 were restricted areas, home to the ancient elders and grand cultivators. We were heading into the quiet parts of the mountain, where the real work began. The inner sect disciples were strictly forbidden from entering the restricted areas. If the enforcement team, those muscle-bound meatheads, caught you, they'd drag you back to their hall for a double dose of physical and mental trauma. But my peak was special. While the other 11 main peaks sat on the outer ring of the sect, our little mountain was tucked deep inside the restricted zone. We didn't break into the forbidden areas. We were already living in one. Besides, sect rules were for the other peaks. What did they have to do with me? I hiked through the restricted territory with zero hesitation. As I carried Hututu on my back, I started explaining our daily routine. Every peak had its specialty, and ours was medicine. My master, Huyun, used to be known as the soulmate of women, a high-level gynecologist of the cultivation world. The problem was, Huyun's disciples were all born with a rebellious streak. If a person is made of 100 pounds of flesh, 99 of those pounds were pure defiance in my brothers. No one wanted to inherit master's medical skills, which often left the old man sighing about his legacy dying with him. As the eldest disciple, I didn't really want to learn it either, but master wouldn't let me go. After years of being dragged around and forced to watch, I'd actually picked up about 70 or 80% of his craft. In the world of cultivation, people don't get normal diseases. If you catch a cold, you just circulate your qi, and it's gone. If you're poisoned or wounded, you go to the pill peak for a miracle elixir. If the pill peak can't fix you, there's no point coming to us. You might as well start booking the funeral banquet. Honestly, our medical skills were mostly useless. My knowledge from my past life didn't help much here either. I couldn't exactly grab a golden core stage cultivator and tell him, "That's not a core, it's a kidney stone. We need to cut it out." Or tell a nascent soul expert, "What nascent soul? You're just pregnant. It's an ectopic pregnancy, actually. We need to operate. Stop cultivating and start believing in science." They'd think I was the one who belonged in a mental hospital. Our medicine was mostly pulse reading, acupuncture, and prescriptions, but it was really 80% psychological counseling. That's why Master was so popular with the ladies. Cultivators need someone to talk to. I never inherited Master's high-level simp charisma, though. He had these cheesy pickup lines that made my skin crawl. He'd visit the ladies at the Jade Peak, and when he came back, he'd sigh about how beautiful they were. I used to roll my eyes at his lines, thinking life as a cultivator must be incredibly boring if that garbage worked on them. One day, I got fed up and unloaded a barrage of modern cringe pickup lines I remembered from the internet in my past life. Master's face went from contempt to shock, then to dead serious. He pulled out a notebook, started taking frantic notes, and declared that very night that his legacy was finally in good hands. He grabbed his new Bible of pickup lines and left for a long traveling trip the next morning. I walked the mountain path, plucked a blade of grass, and bit down on it with a smirk. If the world's romantic talent was divided into 10 parts, I owned 12, and the rest of the world owed me 2. I was a god-tier flirt in this era. "Big brother, you're smiling really creepily," Tutu's voice piped up from behind me. I coughed, clearing my throat. "Tutu, you're too young. You wouldn't understand." "Oh," she muttered, turning her gaze toward the scenery. The Qingyun sect was one of the 9 great sacred lands for a reason. The mountains were like a painting, with stone walkways winding through the peaks like silk ribbons. Mist rose from the deep canyons, shifting like ghosts between the trees. It was breathtakingly beautiful, even more so than her home at Green Hill. Looking at the peaks, Tutu remembered why she was here. Her grandfather had told her that a legendary treasure of the Fox clan was hidden here. An absolute genius of their race, an 8-tailed spirit fox, lived in seclusion within these mountains. He was the first in 10,000 years to reach that level, but he had sworn an eternal grudge against Green Hill and changed his appearance to hide. Only a decade ago, when he broke through to the seven-tailed stage, did the world realize a powerful demon lived within the Qingyan sect. The sect didn't even care where he was. As long as he was their honored guest and helped out when needed, they didn't care if he was a man or a monster. Tutu's mission was to find this senior and learn how to fully awaken her bloodline. Even though she had the legendary nine-tailed fox blood, many in history had it and never made it past seven tails. This senior had reached the eight-tailed stage, comparable to a tribulation transcendence expert, entirely on his own. The elders back home were so regretful they spent their nights crying. The Fox clan had been weak for so long, often kidnapped to serve as cultivation partners because of their beauty. They desperately needed a powerhouse to protect them. Tutu clenched her little fists. She had to succeed, no matter the cost. Not just for herself, but for the entire Fox clan. Big brother, she whispered, gathering her courage. Since you always walk around the forbidden areas, have you ever seen a really, really handsome, powerful cultivator living out here? I thought about her question for a second. Members of the Fox clan were famous for being incredibly handsome or beautiful. They were the kind of people you never forgot after a single glance. If I had seen a high-level cultivator like that, I would definitely remember. I shook my head and looked at Tutu. Honestly, no. I've never met anyone more handsome than your second or third brothers. Besides, the people living deep in these forbidden areas are all old monsters who have been around forever. How good-looking can they really be? I paused, realizing my little sister might have a bit of a superficial streak. She was way too focused on looks. If I didn't correct this now, she'd end up getting tricked by some pretty-faced scoundrel later in life. I had to nip this in the bud. Tutu, I said, my voice heavy with elder brother wisdom. It's not wrong to like beautiful things, but obsessing over them is a sickness. You understand. Tutu blinked, caught off guard by the sudden lecture. Some people are gold on the outside and trash on the inside. I continued. They look good, but they're useless. Take your second brother, Lung Qingsong. He looks cool and handsome, right? He still wet the bed when he was 10. Tutu's eyes went wide. Second brother wet the bed at 10? I stopped doing that when I was 4. She looked genuinely shocked. The cold, aloof, terrifying swordsman had a secret history of soggy sheets. In her mind, she had just scored a major victory over him. Exactly, I said, leaning into the lie. And what about your third brother, Bai Feiyu? He's handsome too, right? Back in the day, he was a total crybaby. Cried over every little thing. Tutu started giggling. She was getting a massive ego boost from this. Compared to these legendary geniuses, she felt like a superstar. She started begging me for more dirt on them, and I was happy to oblige. I went all out. I told her they didn't know how to wipe themselves after using the bathroom. I told her they used to run around the yard naked. I even told her they once had a contest to see who could pee the furthest and ended up soaking each other. The forest path was filled with the sound of Tutu's high-pitched, chicken-like laughter. Meanwhile, back at the peak, Lung Qingsong suddenly sneezed violently while fixing the roof. High up in a tree, Bai Feiyu's leg buckled, nearly sending him tumbling to the ground. They looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. Is that kid Lin Yuan talking trash about me again? As Tutu and I ventured deeper into the forbidden zone, the scenery became surreal. Giant fish swam through the air between trees. Mushrooms towered like skyscrapers. White cranes danced in the mist, and I even saw a tiger being ridden like a pony. Eventually, we found a massive, gold-striped white tiger. I managed to tame it, or at least convince it to give us a lift, and we rode through the woods in style. Tutu sat in front, kicking her legs happily, but she still hadn't given up on her mission. Big brother, she asked, trying to sound casual. What's your favorite animal? I stroked my chin, acting like I was deep in thought. I'd have to say little foxes. Tutu turned around, her face lighting up with pure joy. She quickly looked away, trying to hide her massive grin. I like foxes too, but foxes might not like you back, brother. She was beaming. If he likes foxes, she thought, then he must like me. Are there any foxes around here? She asked, pushing her luck. Sure, I replied. All sorts of beasts live in Qingyan Valley. Foxes are definitely among them. Can we go see one? Please. I looked at her hopeful expression. I figured she was probably homesick and wanted to see one of her own kind. Being a good brother, I couldn't say no. We hopped off the tiger, and I shooed it away. Its scent as the king of the forest would scare off any smaller animals. Once it was gone, I pulled a coil of rope out of my basket and started digging in the dirt. "What are you doing?" Tutu asked. I pulled out a chicken leg I'd saved for lunch and started heating it up. "I'm making a trap. I'll catch a fox for you." Tutu looked at my simple rope loop and felt her intelligence as a fox was being insulted. "Brother, that trap is way too simple. You can't catch a smart fox with that." I led Tutu behind a nearby bush to hide. "Trust me, I've caught the sect master with this method before." Tutu stared at me, wondering if she had just accidentally learned a dark secret about the leader of the entire Chinyan sect. A few minutes after we hid, a creature emerged from the shadows. It had thick, fluffy fur and a big, bushy tail. But its face was square and looked incredibly, well, derpy. If I had seen it, I would have screamed. It looked exactly like a Tibetan sand fox from an internet meme. The fox circled the trap, a look of mockery in its dull, deadpan eyes. A chi refining kid and a member of the nine-tailed clan? I thought they were up to something serious. They're just trying to catch me? The fox sneered internally. I am the great eight-tailed spirit fox. My wisdom is legendary. How could I possibly fall for such a... Its nose twitched. The smell of the chicken leg hit its brain like a freight train. Every fox has a weakness for chicken. It's biological. Just one bite, it thought. The fox reached out a paw. It was fast, faster than any normal trap. As the rope snapped shut, the fox was already pulling back, chicken leg in its mouth. It chewed slowly, savoring the flavor. Delicious. That rope was way too slow for someone at the tribulation transcendence level. But then, the rope that had missed suddenly came alive. It whipped through the air like a strike of lightning, wrapping around the fox's neck before it could blink. The fox tried to flex its muscles to snap the cord, but its power vanished. It felt like its energy was being swallowed by a black hole. Its body went numb, and it collapsed onto the grass, its vision fading to black. Its last thought was a bitter realization. That kid wasn't joking. The rope is a high-level treasure, and the bastard poisoned the chicken. I could feel the rope tightening around the sand fox, binding it in a humiliating, awkward position. It was a tribulation transcendence expert, a being of immense power. Yet here it was, tied up like a common animal. In its fading consciousness, it wanted to scream. It was supposed to be a legend, not a trophy caught by a brat. Back at the pavilion, Tutu suddenly looked up from her work. She looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Senior brother, did you hear someone shouting?" I was busy carefully digging up a spirit herb from the soil. I didn't even look back. "Are you hungry again? There's food in the stone pavilion." "I'm not that hungry," she huffed, but she still adjusted the flower crown she had just finished weaving and skipped over to the pavilion anyway. She grabbed a fragrant roasted chicken leg and took a massive bite. Her cheeks puffed out like a happy little hamster. Suddenly, the sky went dark. Tutu stopped chewing and stared at the clouds. A massive, three-headed monster bird descended from the heavens. Its eyes glowed with a feral red light, and a crushing pressure radiated from its body. "Senior brother, there's a big bird. It looks really mean," she stammered, pointing upward. I carefully lifted the herb I had unearthed and turned around. When I saw the red glow in the bird's eyes, my expression darkened. This wasn't just a bird. Its bloodline had awakened, turning it into a vicious beast. "Tutu, get over here. Stay close to me," I said. She didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled into the pavilion, peeking out with her tiny head. The bird was nearly 20 meters long, all three heads glaring down at us. It had clearly chosen us as its next meal. "Tutu," I called out, my voice calm. "You've been eating chicken for 2 days. Want to see what roasted bird tastes like?" Tutu didn't know exactly how strong I was, but after seeing me handle our brothers this morning, she had total faith. "Hey, you stupid bird," she yelled at the sky. "My senior brother is a super powerful chi refining expert. You're in big trouble." I felt a vein throb in my forehead. I knew she was trying to cheer me on, but calling me a chi refining expert sounded more like an insult in this world. I turned my gaze back to the bird and pulled up its stats. Asterisk name, three-headed bird. Bloodline awakening, failed. Cultivation, nascent soul level 6. Evaluation, an ant. Asterisk. I let out a breath of relief. Just an ant. The bird seemed to sense my contempt. Its 3 heads thrashed wildly before opening their beaks. One spat a torrent of flame, another unleashed a howling gale, and the middle one sprayed a disgusting, corrosive acid. The wind fanned the flames, and the acid made the fire explode in size. Within seconds, the sky was a sea of burning death. "Oh, it knows physics," I muttered. "Too bad it's still trash." I reached into my robe and pulled out a book. I flipped through the pages, memorized the chi flow, and tossed the book aside. I slammed my palms together. Water dragon. The massive ocean of chi inside me surged. Steam began to roll off my skin as a colossal dragon made of pure water erupted from the ground. It roared, growing larger by the second as it tore through the air. The dragon's mist smothered the sea of fire instantly. It lunged forward, pinning the 3-headed bird with its claws and snapping its jaws shut around the beast's necks. The bird didn't even have time to scream before it was swallowed whole. The water dragon lingered in the sky, swaying rhythmically. As it absorbed the ambient energy, its watery eyes began to glow with actual intelligence. A faint, terrifying draconic pressure started to leak from its body. I frowned. This was the problem. My chi was so dense that every time I used a spell, the damn thing tried to come to life. "Vile beast, return to your form," I shouted. I snapped my connection to the spell. The dragon let out a mournful cry before dissolving into a heavy downpour. The charred corpse of the 3-headed bird tumbled out of the mist and slammed into the grass. Hututu stared at me like I was a god. Her eyes were sparkling. She knew I was strong, but this was different. That water dragon had felt real. She had almost wet her pants from the sheer pressure of it. "Senior brother, you're amazing," she cheered, clapping her hands wildly. I put my hands on my hips and laughed, soaking in the praise. While I was busy being proud of myself, Tutu scrambled out of the pavilion and ran toward the book I had thrown on the ground. She was convinced it was some ancient, forbidden scripture. She picked it up with trembling hands and opened it. The title was written in plain, boring characters, "The Beginner's Guide to 5 Elements Techniques." Her heart sank. She flipped through the pages. These were basic spells that any low-level cultivator, or even a commoner, could find in a bookstore for a few copper coins. Wait, she thought, her eyes widening. Is the real technique hidden inside these common words? It must be. My senior brother is a genius. She hugged the book to her chest like it was a holy relic and ran back to me. "Senior brother, your supreme secret manual." I coughed awkwardly as she handed it back. I quickly tucked the book away. It was the same book I used to prop up a wobbly table leg in my room, but she didn't need to know that. I couldn't exactly tell her that I was literally only capable of learning the most basic chi refining spells in existence. Even though my spells looked like world-ending disasters, they were still just basic chi refining techniques at heart. The problem was my talent. If I tried to read a high-level manual, it looked like gibberish to me. I couldn't understand a single word. Even with the basic stuff, I'd forget the energy flow the second I finished the spell. If I didn't have the book in front of me, I couldn't cast it twice. I once asked my master about this. The old man just shook his head and gave me some cryptic nonsense about the law not being passed to 6 ears. He loved acting mysterious to make himself look powerful. Personally, I just think my talent for magic is absolute garbage. Without a book in my hand, my only move was to explode my raw energy in a straight line. I called it chi bursting. It felt low-tech, like I was some space monkey from a cartoon instead of a refined cultivator. "Senior brother, was that the secret water style of the Qingyan sect?" Tutu asked, her eyes wide with worship. I cleared my throat and played along. "Of course, your senior brother is a legendary magic prodigy." Tutu gasped, her little face filled with awe. Satisfied with my ego boost, I grabbed my little tagalong's hand. "Come on, let's go see if our trap caught us a fox." Deep in the woods, a Tibetan fox was hanging from a tree, tied up in a complicated rope knot. It looked like it had given up on life. This was Huyen, a powerful cultivator at the Tribulation Transcendent stage. I can't make a sound, Huyen thought, hanging there like a piece of meat. If those old monsters living here see me like this, I'm finished. My dignity as a powerhouse is gone. I'm staying tied up on purpose. Asterisk, yeah, it's funny. It's a joke. Asterisk. He tried to move, but the rope tightened. The bells on the rope jingled, and a wave of pain hit him. He kept his face perfectly flat. That square, stupid-looking fox face was great for hiding the fact that he was screaming internally. Senior brother, can I learn high-level Taoist magic like that one day? Tutu's voice drifted through the trees. Huyen immediately played dead. Whoa, Tutu, you actually caught one. I blurted out, staring at the fox. Wait, why is there a square-faced Tibetan fox in these woods? I stepped closer, and a blue screen flickered in my vision. Name, Huyen. Species, eight-tailed spirit fox. Cultivation, tribulation transcendence stage. Bone structure, 8. Charm, 0.5. Luck, 1.5. Special skill, eight-tailed form. Evaluation, looks aren't everything, but they're about 90% of the problem. My eyebrows jumped. A tribulation-level fox? I looked at Tutu. Was this her secret bodyguard? Had the demon race really sent a world-class powerhouse just to watch over a little girl? But Tutu looked genuinely confused. She clearly didn't recognize him. Senior brother, is that really a fox? She asked, pointing. It's so ugly. It's a specific breed, I said, nodding. Ugly, sure, but definitely a fox. Huyen's ears twitched. He was fuming. If he weren't paralyzed by the rope, he would have torn us to pieces for insulting his face. He hated people talking about his looks more than anything. I was a bit worried. If I let him go, would he go on a rampage? I wasn't scared for myself, but I had to protect Tutu. Tutu, stay back. I'll let him down, I said. I walked up and started untying the rope. This wasn't just any rope. It was the immortal binding cord my master gave me. As long as you fed it chi, it could trap a god. Best of all, it didn't have a level requirement. Even a mortal could use it, which made it perfect for a chi refiner, like me who couldn't use real treasures. The moment the rope fell away, Huyen snapped his eyes open. The air froze. The crushing pressure of a tribulation stage master flooded the clearing. Brat, you dare. Crunch. Before he could finish his threat, I grabbed him by the throat and slammed him into the dirt. Ow, ow, ow. Stop. It hurts, he shrieked. Keep it down, I hissed, leaning over him. Don't think I don't know who you are, Huyen. If you try anything, I'll turn you into a fur coat. Huyen froze. His mind went blank. How did this kid know his real name? He was a tribulation stage powerhouse, yet this human boy was holding him down like a common stray. He tried to circulate his internal energy, but my chi was sitting on his dantian like a mountain, crushing his power into nothing. Is this kid a 10,000-year-old monster in disguise? Huyen wondered, trembling. I thought I was the one playing weak, but this guy is on a whole different level. He immediately switched tactics. Senior, I understand. Please, have mercy. I was a little confused why he was calling me senior, but I rolled with it. I won't hurt you. You're probably one of the sect's hidden guardians, right? Just play with the little fox behind me for a bit, and I'll let you go. Otherwise, I'll scatter your soul. I didn't actually know how to scatter a soul, but I figured if he resisted, I'd just burn him to ashes. Tribulation stage? Big deal. I'd beaten up plenty of the hidden elders living around these peaks. Huyen nodded frantically. I picked him up by the scruff of the neck and walked back to Tutu with a grin. See, Tutu? This is a Qingyun fox. I swung him back and forth to show him off. In my excitement, I accidentally exposed, well, his private parts, while showing her he was a real fox. Tutu let out a horrified shriek and covered her eyes. I suddenly remembered she was a fox spirit too. That was probably a bit too much information for her. Huyen just stared at the sun, the light dying in his eyes. His dignity was gone. He had been humiliated in front of a member of the royal nine-tailed bloodline. The sunlight is really bright today, he thought, numbly. Senior brother, he's so ugly. Tutu squeaked from behind her hands. But I guess he's kind of cute in a stupid way. Tutu cautiously reached out a finger and poked the fox's fur. She giggled, her eyes bright with curiosity. She told me she had never seen a fox like this back at Qingqiu Mountain. It was a brand new experience for her. When the fox, Huyen, heard her words, his ears twitched. He turned those dead fish eyes toward her. For 1,000 years, no one from his own race had ever called him cute. Looking at his square, grumpy face, I realized Tutu had a very strange sense of aesthetics. It hit her right in the heart. "Senior brother, let me hold him." Tutu reached out her arms, begging. I gave Huyin a warning look. If he tried anything, I'd end him. After he nodded submissively, I handed him over. Tutu struggled a bit to pick him up since he was almost as big as she was. As she rubbed his smooth fur, she felt a sudden surge of kinship. At first, he looked a bit weird, she whispered, treating him like a precious new toy. But the more I look at him, the cuter he gets. I looked at her, then at the fox. I really couldn't understand her taste. But then, she hit me with a request that made things difficult. "Senior brother, can we take him back to the peak and raise him?" she pleaded. I hesitated. I didn't want to say no to those puppy dog eyes, but this guy was an 8-tailed spirit fox in the tribulation stage. I didn't think he was particularly scary, but in the outside world, someone at his level would be treated like a god in the 9 great holy lands. Who would treat a tribulation stage powerhouse as a common pet? Did he not care about his dignity? "I'm willing," a voice suddenly echoed in my mind. I jumped slightly, looking down at the fox in Tutu's arms. It was Huyin. He was using telepathic transmission. "She is of my kin," Huyin said flatly. "I want to see why a young fox from my clan came to the Qingyan sect. Besides, she's the first person in centuries to call me cute." That reason felt a bit thin, but I kept my doubts to myself. I was only at the qi refining stage, at least officially, so I couldn't send a telepathic message back. I just looked him in the eyes, questioning his motives. Huyin had his own plans. He had grown up hated and mocked by his own kind because of his ugly face. Tutu's genuine praise had actually touched a spot in his frozen heart. More importantly, he saw me as his big opportunity. He was already at the peak of the world, but the path to becoming an immortal had been cut off for ages. Yet, here I was, a man he believed to be a hidden immortal. Staying near me and Tutu was exactly what he wanted. As for his dignity, I'd already seen his private parts earlier. He didn't have any dignity left to protect. Since Tutu wanted him and the fox didn't object, I had no reason to refuse. If he had bad intentions, like trying to possess Tutu's body, it was actually better to keep him where I could see him. If he tried any soul-stealing tricks back at our peak, I had brothers who were experts at messing with souls. The deal was struck. All 3 of us were happy as we started the trek back to the mountain. The early autumn breeze was cool and refreshing. I reached out, using a bit of qi to pluck 2 spirit fruits from the trees, and we munched on them as we walked. My basket was full of the monster bird's heart, its core, and the herbs we'd gathered. Tutu hummed a nursery rhyme that echoed along the mountain path. Life felt peaceful. Suddenly, a streak of gold light flashed across the sky and stopped right in front of me. It was a paper crane. I held out my hand, and it landed softly, unfolding into a yellow parchment. I looked at the signature and realized I'd forgotten something important. I hadn't finished Tutu's registration yet. The letter was from the main peak of the Qingyan sect. Every new inner disciple had to go there to light their life lamp. It wasn't a way to control them, but a way to protect them. If the flame flickered, the sect would know the disciple was in danger and send a rescue team. It was time to make her an official member of the sect. The last time I did this was 5 or 6 years ago when Bai Feiyu joined. If not for the crane, I would have completely forgotten. I used my finger as a pen and qi as ink, scrawling 3 messy words. I got it. I breathed a bit of qi into the paper, and it transformed back into a crane. It circled me playfully before flying off toward the main peak. With my qi boosting it, the crane seemed much more energetic than when it arrived. We made it back to our peak just in time for dinner. Tutu formally introduced her new pet to the others. She called him handsome. Lung Qing Song, Bai Feiyu, and Qin Changxing just saw a weird-looking fox. They figured she was just homesick. They all knew she was a fox spirit anyway. It was the one secret we all kept for her. Huyin was smart enough to hide his aura perfectly. To my brothers, he looked like nothing more than a common animal. After dinner, everyone went to their rooms. Tutu climbed into bed, hugging Huyin tightly. She started whispering to him, rambling about her home and her life. She was only 5 years old, after all. No matter how much of a genius she was still just a little girl who missed her family. Finding a fellow fox meant everything to Tutu. Even if it was just a regular animal with no spiritual wisdom, she needed someone to talk to. She whispered her deepest secrets into Hu Yan's fur until her eyes grew heavy, and she drifted off to sleep right there on the bed. Hu Yan watched her with a cold, expressionless gaze. He finally understood. This little girl had been sent here by those old fools in the demon realm just to steal some secret cultivation technique. It was exactly the kind of pathetic scheme they'd come up with. He felt a flicker of disdain and prepared to jump off the bed, but then he noticed Tutu shivering. She was curled into a tiny ball, trying to stay warm. Sighing, he used a paw to drag the blanket over her. Suddenly, Tutu's hand shot out and grabbed his paw. Hu Yan tried to pull away, but she held on tight, stroking his soft fur in her sleep. "Mama," she murmured, her voice thick with longing. "I miss you so much." The next morning, a sharp knocking at the door jolted Tutu awake. She had been in the middle of a dream about eating candied hawthorns. She rubbed her eyes and sat up, still trying to remember where she was, when I pushed the door open. I was wearing my usual green robes and a smile. "Time for breakfast, master?" she asked groggily. "Breakfast is later," I said. "And we aren't eating here today. We're heading over to the main peak, Qingyan Peak, to grab a free meal. Hurry up and get ready. We need to light your life lamp today." I glanced at Hu Yan, who was sitting perfectly still at the head of the bed. He didn't move an inch. Tutu stumbled out of bed, threw on her clothes, and followed me outside. As soon as we stepped out, she looked up and saw Bai Feiyu standing perfectly still on a tree branch, looking like a brooding hero. "Senior brother Bai is practicing so early," Tutu said, impressed. "He's so hardworking." "He's just posing," I muttered, rolling my eyes. "I don't know who he's trying to impress this early in the morning. Let's go, or we'll miss lunch." "Wait, master, are we walking?" Tutu looked at me with a worried expression. She knew I was only at the 9th level of chi refining, which meant I couldn't fly. She was dreading another endless trek up those mountain paths. I laughed and shook my head. "No climbing today. Someone from the main peak is coming to pick us up." Right on cue, a sharp bird cry echoed through the air. A massive white crane circled above our peak. A young, arrogant voice, amplified by chi, boomed across the mountainside. "By order of the sect leader, new inner disciple Hututu is to proceed to Qingyun Peak to light her life lamp. Hututu, step forward. All others, clear the area. Step aside." My eyes narrowed as I watched that crane circling above us. This was my mountain. Who did this kid think he was, acting so bold on my turf? He looked new, and honestly, that crane looked pretty plump. "Little Bai," I called out to the tree. "Shoot that thing down. Let's have an extra dish for lunch." Bai Feiyu opened his eyes, looking annoyed. He had been stabilizing his cultivation, and someone screaming through a megaphone had ruined his focus. He wasn't happy. The 3-foot green breeze soared at his waist, hummed, sensing his mood, and shot out of its scabbard like a bolt of lightning. "Senior brother Bai, wait. Save the crane." A golden streak of light intercepted the sword just in time. Another young man, handsome and dressed in white Taoist robes, descended on a flying sword. He bowed deeply toward us. "Brother Bai, please forgive him. Junior brother Zhu has only been in the inner sect for a short time. If he offended you, I apologize on his behalf." Bai Feiyu closed his eyes again, and his sword flew back into its sheath with a sharp click. I pulled up the newcomer's status panel. Name, Ling Feng, eldest disciple of the sect leader. Cultivation, nascent soul, level 3. Bone structure, 8. Charm, 8. Luck, 8. Sword talent, 8. Special skill, twin sword slash. Evaluation, pretty average. "Old Ling," I said, crossing my arms. "How do you handle things over there? Why are you sending every random stray to my peak?" Ling Feng smiled apologetically. "I was delivering a letter for Master, so I asked Junior Brother Zhu to come in my place. I told him to be polite, but he's young and a bit arrogant. Please, Brother Lin, don't take it to heart. He was polite and gentle, the kind of guy who made you feel like you were basking in a spring breeze." "Senior brother." They tried to attack the sect leader's mount. A voice shouted from the back of the crane. A teenager poked his head out, glaring at us. I looked at the kid, and my heart skipped a beat. My eyes widened as I read his panel. Name, Zhu Yuan. Demon race Holy Sun. Cultivation, core formation level 1. Bone structure, 10+1. Charm, 8. Luck, 7. Saber talent, 10. Special skill, thousand-faced demon form. Evaluation, a high-profile villain. The sect leader had taken the holy son of the demon race as his disciple, and the demons actually sent their own prince to be a mole. Talk about an expensive gamble. I felt a headache coming on. The war between Taoists and demons had been going on since ancient times. I once asked Bai Feiyu about it, and he just said it was a conflict of fundamental beliefs. It had been that way in his past life, too. I frowned. This Zhu Yuan had incredible stats, even higher than Bai Feiyu's. But talent didn't scare me. Any genius can be dealt with if you don't give them time to grow. What worried me was the sect leader. If the world found out the leader of one of the 9 great sanctuaries had a demon holy son as his top disciple, the Qingyun sect would be the laughingstock of the righteous path. Ling Feng stayed there on his sword, waiting patiently for my response. Bai Feiyu dropped down from the tree, looking confused. He knew I usually played the nice guy role, so he was surprised I was being so difficult. What's wrong? Bai Feiyu whispered. Little Bai, I said quietly. What do you think of that kid on the crane? Bai Feiyu glanced at Zhu Yuan and nodded. He's not as good as our second brother, but his talent is extraordinary. The sect leader found a good one. I was stunned. Even a reincarnated sword immortal couldn't see through the kid's disguise. Was it because of that thousand-faced skill? I looked up at Zhu Yuan, who was still looking down his nose at us. I was just about to teach this demon holy son a lesson he'd never forget when someone else moved first. Chen Chongqing stepped forward. Suddenly, the mountain trembled. The protective array surrounding our peak roared to life. A massive, translucent dome shimmered into existence, sealing us off from the rest of the world. I felt a jolt of genuine shock. Chen Chongqing was in charge of the mountain's defenses, but he was the most cautious person I knew. He usually hid behind everyone else at the first sign of trouble. For him to activate the entire array system meant something was horribly wrong. Was the Qingyun sect under attack? Was this the end? I wasn't the only one reacting. Beside me, Bai Feiyu's sword in 10 exploded. Thousands of invisible blades saturated the air in an instant. Then, a loud crash echoed from the house. Lung Qingsong had just smashed through the newly repaired roof, soaring into the sky like a literal sword. He hovered there, his icy gaze locked onto Ling Feng and Zhu Yuan. My brothers knew Chongqing's personality as well as I did. He wouldn't flip the kill switch unless it was a matter of life and death. The atmosphere on the peak shifted violently. Under the influence of the array, the world felt like it had been turned upside down. Thunder rolled and lightning lashed across the sky. A torrential downpour began, but the raindrops weren't water. They transformed into sharp, invisible blades midair. At the center of this storm, Ling Feng and Zhu Yuan turned deathly pale. Ling Feng, a nascent soul cultivator, looked up at the intricate golden patterns forming in the clouds and felt a wave of pure despair. He looked down and saw Bai Feiyu and Lung Qingsong, both locked onto him, ready to strike. Even though they were technically only at the foundation establishment stage, Ling Feng knew he wouldn't last 3 moves against them. The rumors were true. People called our peak a den of monsters, and Ling Feng finally understood why. He probably wished he'd never come here. As senior brother, what are they doing? Zhu Yuan stammered. The genius was shaking on his crane, his arrogance completely gone. This is the Qingyun sect. They wouldn't actually kill fellow disciples, would they? Zhu Yuan still believed his status as a once-in-a-10,000-year genius would protect him. He didn't think the sect would let him die. Ling Feng gave him a bitter, pitying look and stepped in front of him. Senior brother Lin Yuan. Ling Feng shouted down at me, his voice desperate. If junior brother Zhu or I have offended you, I apologize. Please, stay your hand. I stood there, completely baffled. I honestly had no idea what was going on. I looked at Bai Feiyu. What's the deal? Is Chongqing actually going to kill them? I don't know. Bai Feiyu whispered back, his hand on his hilt. But if Chongqing is going all out, he must have found a reason. Before I could ask anything else, the clouds parted. A massive golden formation stabilized in the sky, and out stepped a figure. Then another, and another. Within seconds, hundreds of men in purple Taoist robes surrounded the intruders. Every single one of them was Chen Chongqing. The clones weren't just illusions. Their auras were identical, and under the array's power, Their cultivation was climbing, hitting the peak of the nascent soul realm. Hundreds of Chen Changshangs drew their swords simultaneously. The sound of steel ringing against steel filled the air, cold and lethal. Ling Feng and Zhu Yuan drew their weapons, but they looked like cornered rats. Ling Feng was a third-stage nascent soul cultivator, but facing hundreds of opponents at his own level, he knew he'd be dead in a second. I watched in awe. I'd never seen Changxing this decisive. He had deployed every single one of his puppets. I scanned the crowd and spotted one figure standing slightly behind the others. That had to be the real one. The hundreds of clones spoke in perfect unison, their voices echoing like a god's decree. Senior brother Ling Feng, please leave. Ling Feng didn't move. And junior brother Zhu? He stays, the clones replied. Ling Feng's expression hardened. He reached behind his back and drew a second, strangely shaped sword. From the day he called me senior brother, he became my responsibility. I won't abandon him. Senior brother. Zhu Yuan whispered, clearly moved. The army of Changshangs didn't argue. Their eyes remained cold and fixed on their targets. Then you can die with him. The air screamed as hundreds of nascent soul-level puppets attacked at once. Ling Feng threw out a small bronze bell, chanting a mantra that caused the artifact to expand into a protective shield. Sword Qi slammed into the bell like a hail of bullets, creating ripples of golden light. Ling Feng was talented, and he had high-level artifacts gifted by the sect leader, but the sheer pressure was overwhelming. He was fighting for his life against a man who usually spent his days hiding in a shed. The monster of the mountain had finally shown its teeth. Ling Feng was fighting for his life. He was a talented disciple with high-level artifacts, but the sheer pressure was overwhelming. Even a genius has to pay a price when facing hundreds of opponents at the same level. If he didn't give it his all, he would die right here. I watched as the sheer number of puppets created a qualitative change in the battle. Nobody knew what kind of secret technique Chen Changsheng was using to summon so many clones. The people from the main peaks must have been wondering what kind of monsters lived on our small mountain. While Ling Feng struggled to hold the line, Zhu Yuan sat frozen on the back of his white crane. He had never been this close to death. If his senior brother hadn't been standing in front of him, he would have been erased in a heartbeat. I could see the confusion and rage in Zhu Yuan's eyes. He didn't understand why this was happening. From the moment he was born, whether in the demon realm or the Qingyan sect, his life had been smooth. He was a chosen one, a high-ranking noble destined to look down on the world. Now, he was like a mouse trapped among a dozen cats. He had come here as a spy for the great demon cause, risking his life for the mission. He hadn't even been here a month, and he was already about to die. Zhu Yuan looked at Ling Feng's back with a mix of resentment and desperation. He felt like he was being sent to his grave over a simple delivery mission. He didn't want to die. He was the demon prince, the future demon emperor. His eyes turned a deep, blood red. The pride of a genius is a strange thing. Sometimes, the shame of needing protection is enough to trigger a breakthrough. Zhu Yuan's aura suddenly exploded. He jumped from the Foundation establishment stage straight into the third level of the Golden Core realm in an instant. Some people stay stuck for years, while others break through as easily as drinking water. Zhu Yuan let out a guttural roar. Black energy surged from his body, condensing into a dark blade. He kicked off the crane, lunging out from the protection of Ling Feng's golden bell. He charged straight into the sea of Changshangs. His blade intent was fierce and desperate. In a flash, he cut down 3 of the puppets. The strike was so focused that the puppets couldn't even move before being sliced in half. But it was a suicide mission. The moment he landed the blow, a dozen streaks of sword Qi slammed into his chest. Zhu Yuan spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying backward. Ling Feng panicked, rushing out from his shield to catch the unconscious boy. Now, both of them were exposed to the rain of swords. Enough. I spoke up, my voice calm but firm. I raised my hand, and a massive palm of golden energy manifested in the air. It swept across the sky, blocking the incoming sword rain like a massive shield. Ling Feng looked down at me, his eyes filled with genuine gratitude. I kept my face expressionless, but inside, I was hurting. My neck was getting stiff from looking up. I still haven't learned how to fly, so I had to do all my cool interventions from the ground. I had stopped the immediate killing blow, but Changxing wasn't finished. His hundreds of clones began to move again, shifting into a complex, deadly formation. My eyelid twitched. This kid really didn't know when to quit. Once he started a fight, he wanted a corpse. Qing Song, Feiyu, pin him down, I shouted. Since I couldn't fly up there myself, I had to send the younger brothers. Lung Qing Song didn't hesitate for a second. He shot upward like a bolt of lightning. Bai Feiyu hesitated for a heartbeat, glancing at me before following close behind. They weren't trapped in the formation, so they found Changxing's real body immediately. Qing Song moved like a blur, his sword flickering once and knocking the blade right out of Changxing's hand. The hundreds of clones froze instantly, but Changxing still wasn't backing down. Even with his sword gone, he reached into his sleeve. I knew that look. He had a dozen hidden trump cards, and he was ready to use every single one of them to make sure Zhu Yuan died. His eyes were bloodshot. He had lost all his usual caution. It was like he was possessed by a blood feud from a past life. You and I, one of us dies today, he growled. Suddenly, Bai Feiyu grabbed Changxing's arm, stopping him from pulling whatever was in his sleeve. Third senior brother, Feiyu said softly, his voice full of pity. Eldest senior brother said to stop. At the mention of my name, a flicker of clarity returned to Changxing's eyes. He looked down at me. I shook my head slowly, signaling him to stand down. Changxing stared at the unconscious Zhu Yuan in Ling Feng's arms. He looked devastated. It was as if he had never been this close to killing his enemy before, and the chance was slipping away. Slowly, he lowered his hand. Then, he roared toward the sky. By the heavenly Tao, within 10 years, I, Qin Changxing, will kill Zhu Yuan. If I fail, may gods and demons alike strike me down. Everyone froze. A heavenly Tao oath is no joke. Cultivators don't swear on the heavens unless there is a blood debt that can only be washed away with a life. If you break that oath, the world itself will find a way to dispose of you. The moment the words left his mouth, everyone knew. Whatever was between Changxing and Zhu Yuan, it wasn't just a small grudge. It was a war. The sky suddenly turned pitch black. 9 claps of thunder echoed through the clouds, followed by 9 flashes of lightning. The oath had been accepted. Changxing's face was pale. He performed a quick hand seal, and the hundreds of clones vanished back into his sleeves. He reached out and pulled back the massive golden array covering the sky. He had agreed to let them go, but the cost was high. The rage and the backlash of the oath hit him all at once. He looked at Zhu Yuan one last time, spat out a mouthful of blood, and collapsed into Bai Feiyu's arms. The sky cleared, but the air felt heavier than before. The killing intent hadn't vanished. It had just been locked away for the next 10 years. Every eye on our small peak was fixed on Zhu Yuan, who lay limp in Ling Feng's arms. Lung Qingsong didn't move an inch. He stood directly in Ling Feng's path, his sword held low, his expression cold. Bai Feiyu descended from the sky, gently placing the unconscious Changxing onto a lounge chair before shooting back into the air. My 2 brothers now had Ling Feng boxed in from both sides. They moved in perfect synchronization, creating a pincer formation that left no room for escape. They didn't need to exchange words to know the plan. If they struck, it had to be a kill shot. They both knew the weight of the heavenly Tao oath Changxing had just sworn. If Zhu Yuan wasn't dead within 10 years, Changxing's own cultivation and life would be forfeit. My brothers weren't interested in waiting 10 years. They could end this in 10 seconds. To them, the reason didn't matter. Their brother wanted this man dead, and that was enough of a death warrant. Lung Qingsong and Bai Feiyu released their sword intents simultaneously. The air around them turned razor-sharp. Even though Changxing had just summoned hundreds of clones, the sheer, concentrated killing intent coming from these 2 was even more suffocating. It wrapped around Ling Feng like a physical weight. Ling Feng let out a bitter, hollow laugh. He carefully moved the unconscious Zhu Yuan onto the back of his white crane. He wasn't a fool. The moment Changxing made that oath, Ling Feng realized this wasn't just a grudge. This was a blood debt that would only end when one of them stopped breathing. He didn't know what Zhu Yuan had done to provoke such hatred, but it had to be something monstrous. But Ling Feng was the eldest disciple of the main peak. He couldn't just stand there and watch his junior brother be slaughtered. He drew his twin swords, his eyes narrowing as he faced the two monsters in front of him. Even though he was at the nascent soul stage, the pressure he felt was overwhelming. Sword Intent was a high-level power usually reserved for masters who had reached the soul emergence stage. Ling Feng had only just begun to touch the threshold of it himself. He couldn't wrap his head around how two disciples at the Golden Core stage could wield it so perfectly. It was unnatural. It was terrifying. Ling Feng gripped his hilts so hard his knuckles turned white. His own budding sword intent was being crushed before it could even manifest. In the world of sword cultivators, having intent versus not having it was the difference between a god and a mortal. He was struggling just to keep hold of his weapons. If he dropped them, the pressure would ease, but he would be throwing away his pride and his path as a cultivator. To a man like him, that was a fate worse than death. I decided it was time to step in. "Old Ling," I called out from below. "Your junior brother is coughing up blood, and mine is in the same shape. Let's just call this a draw." My voice was like a lifeline to Ling Feng. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for an eternity. "Of course," he said quickly. "It was just a friendly spar between disciples. The match is over. We'll be going now." I walked over to Changsheng and pressed my fingers to his pulse. Bai Feiyu started to say something, likely wanting to remind me how dangerous the oath was, but I didn't let him finish. I pulled a white jade bottle from my robe, poured out a pill, and fed it to Changsheng. "Let them go," I said. My brothers looked unsatisfied, but they obeyed, dropping down from the sky. Ling Feng looked like he had just been granted a royal pardon. He gave me a hurried, messy salute and prepared to fly off on his crane. "Brother Ling," I called out again. He froze. "My junior sister is lighting her life lamp tomorrow. Don't forget to show up." Ling Feng forced a strained smile. "Certainly. I'll be there." "One more thing," I said, my voice casual. "I heard the sect competition is happening in a month." Ling Feng's face paled. He clearly had a bad feeling about where this was going. "That's right. 1 month from now." I nodded. "Tell the sect master that my peak will be participating this time. And make sure Zhu Yuan is there to compete as well." Ling Feng's expression turned miserable. "Brother, is this really necessary? If I had known coming here would cause this much trouble, I never would have brought him." I looked up at him, my gaze flat. "I'm not asking for your opinion, and I'm not negotiating. I'm telling you, if the sect master has a problem with it, tell him to come talk to me personally. Also, my name is Lin Yuan, not Lin. Get it right." Ling Feng didn't argue. He turned his crane and bolted, disappearing into the clouds as fast as he could. Once he was gone, I let out a long sigh. I looked over to see my 3 brothers staring at me intensely. "What are you looking at? Is there something on my face?" "Master," Bai Feiyu said, his voice worried. "What if Zhu Yuan runs away before the competition? The world is a big place. If he hides for 10 years, Changsheng is doomed." I shrugged. "Then what do you want to do? Go to the main peak right now and chop his limbs off?" I hadn't even finished the sentence before Lung Qingsong stood up. He gripped his sword and started walking toward the exit without a word. I had to jump up and grab him. I didn't mean literally. "Sit back down," I yelled. This kid was way too direct for his own good. Hu Tutu was hovering nearby, clutching her fox plushie with a look of pure terror. "Is Brother Changxing going to be okay? He spit out so much blood." I patted her head to calm her down. "He's fine. He just exhausted his energy and let his anger get the best of him. Spitting out that blood actually helped clear the blockage in his chest. It's better out than in." I told Bai Feiyu to keep an eye on Lung Qingsong so he didn't go off on a one-man crusade. Then I picked up Changxing and carried him to his room. As he lay there, Changxing was trapped in a fever dream. He was back in his past life, back in that world of eternal darkness. In the dream, he was covered in filth and gore, swinging his blade at endless waves of demons. His vision was blurred by blood, his meridians were shattered, and the pain was all he knew. In his dream, Changxing was powerless. He couldn't even circulate a shred of true essence. He was fighting on pure instinct, hacking and slashing at shadows. Even so, his grip on his sword never wavered. Suddenly, the scenery shifted. A face appeared, a face he could never forget. It was a man, beautiful in a haunting, demonic way, wearing blood-red robes. A branch-like mark rested between his brows, and his eyes glowed with pure evil. He had horns on his head and black wings sprouting from his back. Countless vengeful spirits swirled around him like a shroud. He looked like a nightmare crawled straight out of the underworld. This was Zhu Yuan, the Saint Emperor of the demon race, the man responsible for the end of the world. In the dream, Zhu Yuan held a blood-red saber in one hand and a severed head in the other. He threw his head back and laughed at the sky. He had become the greatest demon in existence, slaughtering everyone Changxing ever knew and turning the world into a graveyard. When Changxing saw the head in Zhu Yuan's hand, his eyes leaked tears of blood. He let out a desperate, guttural scream. That head belonged to me, his senior brother, Lin Yuan. In that past life, I had always stood at the very front. I was the shield that protected him from every storm and every terror. Even as I died a gruesome death in front of him, I had used my last breath to tell him to run. Changxing wanted revenge. He wanted it every second of every day. He had thought about it until he nearly lost his mind to inner demons. But against Zhu Yuan, who had already reached the level of an immortal, Changxing was nothing more than an ant. Suddenly, my severed head in the dream snapped its eyes open. It looked at Changxing and screamed, "Run! Get out of here!" Changxing bolted upright in bed, gasping for air. Sweat soaked through his clothes. "Had a nightmare?" a familiar voice asked from the side. Hearing my voice, Changxing's tears fell instantly. He scrambled to cover his eyes with his sleeve, his voice muffled. The sand, it got in my eyes. I sat in a chair by the bed and let out a soft chuckle at his poor excuse. My gaze stayed calm. "Do you blame me for stopping you from killing Zhu Yuan?" Changxing shook his head. He felt a pang of regret. Since his rebirth, he had been so careful, but seeing his enemy had wiped his mind blank. He hadn't killed Zhu Yuan, and worse, he had tipped his hand. "I know what you were worried about, brother," Changxing said quietly. "If I killed him, there would be no place for me in the Qingyun sect, or even the entire cultivation world. Sect rules were strict. Killing a fellow disciple was a death sentence, or at best, having your cultivation destroyed and being exiled. If Changxing had killed Zhu Yuan there, he would have been destroying himself too. I couldn't let that happen. That's why I forced that witness, Ling Feng, to admit it was just a friendly spar. As long as everyone involved called it a spar, the sect couldn't touch him." I sighed, looking at my junior brother. I knew he was hiding things. I knew Zhu Yuan was the demon saint's son, and I knew Changxing knew it too. But who would believe us? Even Bai Feiyu, a reincarnated sword immortal, couldn't see through Zhu Yuan's disguise. Why would the old fossils running the sect believe a couple of disciples? However, Changxing had made a heavenly Tao oath before he fainted. That oath would act as a red flag. Everyone would be suspicious of Zhu Yuan now. Sometimes, making people doubt someone is more effective than just accusing them. Changxing flinched when he heard me sigh. "Brother, don't worry. I won't move against him again anytime soon." "Not soon, but you still will later," I said, shaking my head. I walked over to him and lowered my voice. "Did you leave a mark on him?" Changxing nodded. When Zhu Yuan had rushed out to cut down his clones, Changxing had planted a soul mark on him. No matter where Zhu Yuan ran, Changxing could find him. I nodded, satisfied. This brother of mine was cautious and thorough. He was much better than a certain idiot on this mountain who only knew how to charge forward with a sword. "Rest for now," I told him. "What's done is done. We'll take it one step at a time." Changxing lay back down, staring at me blankly. "Brother, if I told you that killing Zhu Yuan could stop a literal apocalypse, would you believe me?" I paused, then shook my head. I chose my words carefully. "You're looking at it wrong. A catastrophe doesn't happen because of just one person. If you kill Zhu Yuan, a second or third Zhu Yuan will just take his place. These things aren't accidents. They're inevitable." Changxing nodded gloomily. "But so many people will die. We have to find a way to stop it." I reached out and smacked him on the forehead. "The Qingyun sect has countless experts. An apocalypse isn't something for a weakling at the core formation stage like you to worry about. Just go to sleep." I scolded him a bit more and headed for the door. As I stepped over the threshold, Changxing's voice came from behind me. "Brother, if a catastrophe really happens, I will protect everyone." My heart stirred, but I didn't look back. If there really is an apocalypse, as long as I'm not dead, the sky won't fall. I am your senior brother, after all. It was a bold statement, delivered with total calm. As I walked away, I couldn't help but cheer for myself internally. Acting cool in front of these monstrously talented brothers of mine felt amazing. It was as refreshing as a cold drink on a hot day. I shut the door and looked toward the courtyard. Under the thick leaves of a large tree, a square-faced Tibetan fox was sitting at a stone table, holding a cup of tea and watching the moon. He looked quite relaxed. "Aren't you afraid my brothers will realize you're a demon?" I asked, walking over and pouring myself a cup. Old Kai, the fox, took a sip of tea. He crossed his legs, carefully hiding his equipment under his fur. "I've masked my aura. Those kids are talented, but they aren't on my level yet. By the way, you're a very good senior brother." "Don't call me senior. I'm not that old," I said, draining the tea in one gulp. My mouth was instantly flooded with a rich aroma and a surge of spiritual energy. My eyes lit up. "Good tea." I reached for the pot, but old Kai snatched it away, looking pained. "This is tea from a 10,000-year-old spirit tree. Who drinks it like that?" I rolled my eyes. This fox was ugly and stingy. "How long do you plan on staying here?" I didn't believe for a second that a tribulation-grade demon would stay here just to be a pet for Hututu. Old Kai carefully put the teapot away and looked back at the moon. At first, I was just curious. I wanted to know why a fox with the nine-tailed bloodline would bother coming to the Chinyan sect. Was he really just waiting to see if Hututu could break through to the nine-tailed stage? Is life really that boring for you? I asked skeptically. "What else is there?" Old Kai shrugged, looking like a philosopher in a fur coat. "Once a cultivator reaches the tribulation stage, life becomes incredibly long. When there's no path left to climb, you have to find some fun to kill the centuries." I looked at him, unimpressed. I'd dealt with tribulation experts before. They didn't seem that scary to me. Old Kai's fox eyes narrowed as if he could read my mind. He let out a soft laugh. "You really think the tribulation stage is just about a high cultivation level? I'll admit, your internal energy is so massive it's terrifying, even to me. But if I actually wanted to kill you, I could still do it." I didn't get angry. I just nodded. I wasn't naive enough to think a simple binding rope had actually defeated him. "So, are you planning to stay until Tutu reaches the nine-tailed stage?" I asked. Old Kai shook his head. "In our clan, moving from 7 tails to 8 is a once-in-10,000-year event. 9 tails? That's nearly impossible. Every fox has their own path. My way won't necessarily work for her. I'll stay until she can protect herself, then I'll leave." He paused, a smirk playing on his snout. "Though, with you and your monstrous brothers around, she's probably safe anywhere in this world. Maybe I just want to be near her." The old fox was talking in circles. One second he was serious, the next he was sentimental. He hopped off the stone stool, his brown fur shimmering as it absorbed the essence of the moonlight. "I'm very happy with the name she gave me," he chuckled. "From now on, call me Handsome." With a flick of his tail, he turned into a breeze and vanished back into Hututu's room. "What a strange fox," I muttered, looking up at the moon. It was massive tonight, so clear it felt like I could reach out and touch it. There was no light pollution here, just raw, natural beauty. Suddenly, my eyes sharpened. A wooden boat was flying across the face of the moon. It moved without wind, gliding closer until I could see 2 young men on board. One was rowing, the other stood at the bow with a brush and paper. Carved into the side of the boat was the character for Law. My heart sank. The Law Peak. These were the enforcers of the Chinyan sect. They investigated anyone who broke sect rules. Even the sect master wasn't exempt. They were all at least core formation stage, and they always had these miserable, judging faces. Everyone else in the sect called them the sect dogs. The boat drifted closer. The man with the brush bowed slightly. "Senior brother Lin Yuan, still awake?" "I've had some insomnia lately," I lied, returning the bow. "What brings you 2 Grim Reapers here?" These 2 were known as the Black and White Reapers of Law Peak. I knew exactly why they were here. Chen Chongqing had caused such a scene this morning that the ripples must have alerted the enforcers. The Peak Master felt someone swearing a heavenly Tao oath on this mountain today, the White Reaper said with a polite smile. "We were sent to ask what happened." They prepared to land the boat in my courtyard, but I blocked them with a gentle wave of spiritual energy. I flashed my most innocent smile. "Oh, that? I was just bored today, so I swore an oath." I told the heavens that if I don't break through to the foundation establishment stage within 10 years, I'll stop being human. The White Reaper's face went blank. Senior brother, I can't exactly report that to the Peak Master. Nobody swears a heavenly Tao oath just because they're bored. You're basically cursing yourself. I shook my head solemnly. Junior brother, you don't understand. My whole peak knows about it. Even the sect master knows. The two enforcers exchanged a suspicious look. Had I really sworn such a ridiculous oath? And since when did the heavenly Tao care about such nonsense? Before they could grill me further, I pulled out a book and tossed it to them. I can't let you leave empty-handed. Here's a little research I've been doing on interrogation techniques. Consider it a gift. The White Reaper caught it. The title was scrawled in messy handwriting. The 10 Great Tortures of the Qingyan Sect. He flipped through a few pages, and I watched the color drain from his face. Then, his eyes lit up with excitement. With this book, no suspect would ever keep their mouth shut again. Since the sect master is aware of the situation, we'll report it, as you said, he said, tucking the book away like a holy relic. You should visit Law Peak sometime, senior brother. Our Peak Master says you're a once-in-a-thousand-year interrogation genius. I'll be sure to drop by and help you upgrade your tools, I promised. As their boat disappeared back into the moonlight, my smile faded. I stood alone in the silence, thinking about what my brother had said earlier. A catastrophe? I whispered to the empty air. Meanwhile, back at the main Qingyun Peak, my other brother Ling Feng was kneeling on the floor. His friend Zhu Yuan lay unconscious on a mat beside him. Sitting in front of them was an old man in a simple vest, fidgeting with a string of prayer beads. This was the sect master, Dong Shuzi. Rumor had it he was on the verge of becoming an immortal. Lin Yuan really said that? Dong Shuzi asked, sounding like he had a massive headache. Ling Feng bowed his head low. I wasn't strong enough to protect my junior brother. Please, master, punish me. Dong Shuzi sighed. If what you told me is true, I'm surprised you even managed to bring him back alive. You did well. Nobody on that mountain is normal. He looked out the window toward my peak. A heavenly Tao oath. Even for us, getting the heavens to acknowledge a vow is nearly impossible. The Tao isn't some cheap toy. It only bears witness when someone with immense destiny makes a vow to another person of equal fate. The fact that the heavenly Tao oath actually worked meant the world itself was paying attention. It proved that both Qin Changxing and Zhu Yuan were individuals of immense destiny. My brother Ling Feng hadn't been able to protect Zhu Yuan, but the sect master, Dong Shuzi, didn't blame him. Ling Feng spent all his years practicing on the main peak, never leaving the gates. He was deaf to anything that wasn't related to cultivation. Naturally, he had no idea what kind of monsters lived on our small peak. Even though Dong Shuzi was being lenient, Ling Feng remained stubborn. He refused to lift his head, consumed by his own perceived failure. Dong Shuzi sighed, feeling the weight of his disciple's rigidity. Since you insist on a punishment, Dong Shuzi said, go back and hand-copy the scripture of the Yellow Court 500 times. I obey my master's decree, Ling Feng replied, bowing deeply. Dong Shuzi looked at him with a mix of pride and a massive headache. Ling Feng was a great student with decent talent, but he was far too upright. He was honest to a fault, bordering on obsessive. Having grown up entirely within the sect, he saw the world in black and white. To him, everything was as pure as a white lotus. Dong Shuzi flicked his sleeve, sending a spirit pill flying. He used his energy to dissolve the medicine into a mist, letting it settle over Zhu Yuan. The pained expression on the unconscious boy's face softened. His breathing grew steady. With a wave of his hand, Dong Shuzi teleported Zhu Yuan back to his own quarters. Now alone with his eldest disciple, Dong Shuzi spoke up. Do you know what a heavenly Tao oath means? A fight to the death, Ling Feng answered simply. Then don't you suspect your junior brother might have some issues? Ling Feng shook his head without hesitation. Master handed him to me personally. I don't believe he could be the problem. There must be a misunderstanding somewhere. Dong Shuzi was silenced by his disciple's sheer density. After a long pause, he tried again. If he really is the problem, what will you do? As his senior brother, it is my responsibility to lead him back to the righteous path, Ling Feng said, his voice heavy with conviction. Dong Shuzi stared at him, bewildered. He felt like Ling Feng was glowing with a literal holy light. It was a waste for this kid to practice Taoism. He should have been a monk. If the Qingyun sect ever fell into Ling Feng's hands, we'd probably be wiped out within 30 years because he'd be too nice to the enemies. Frustrated, Dong Shuzi waved him away, signaling for him to get out. Ling Feng bowed and left. As soon as the door closed, Dong Shuzi stroked his beard, his eyes narrowing in confusion. A heavenly Tao oath. I calculated everything, and I wasn't wrong. What kind of blood feud could Lin Yuan's brother possibly have with Zhu Yuan? Meanwhile, Ling Feng walked straight to Zhu Yuan's room. Inside, Zhu Yuan had already woken up and was sitting cross-legged on the bed, trying to stabilize his energy. He had forced a breakthrough to kill 3 powerful cultivators in an instant. That kind of power jump had shredded his internal meridians. It was a miracle he was breathing. "How are you feeling, junior brother?" Ling Feng asked. He was sitting quietly in a chair, watching Zhu Yuan with a gaze that seemed warm and concerned. But inside Zhu Yuan's heart, a dark fire burned. If it weren't for this White Lotus senior brother making him deliver that stupid letter, he wouldn't be injured. Intentional or not, Ling Feng was responsible. Zhu Yuan told himself that once he stole the sect's ultimate treasure, he would slaughter everyone in the Qingyun sect. "Junior brother, are you all right?" Ling Feng walked over and reached out to touch Zhu Yuan's forehead. Zhu Yuan flinched away, forcing a fake smile onto his face. "Thank you for your concern, senior brother. I'm fine. I won't forget that you saved my life today." "Is that so?" Ling Feng's voice suddenly dropped. "You won't forget it?" The temperature in the room plummeted. The air felt like shards of ice against the skin. Before Zhu Yuan could react, a hand clamped around his throat like a steel vice. Ling Feng lifted him off the bed, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. The warmth was gone. There was only a terrifying, bottomless chill. "Since you won't forget," Ling Feng whispered, his face inches from Zhu Yuan's. "Do you want me to pull your teeth out one by one to help your memory?" Zhu Yuan gasped, his hands clawing at Ling Feng's arm. It wouldn't budge. He felt like he was being held by a statue. "Stop causing me trouble," Ling Feng hissed into his ear. "If you like finding trouble, handle it yourself. This is the only time I help you. If there is a next time, I will tear you into pieces with my own hands." Zhu Yuan nodded frantically, his face turning blue. Ling Feng tossed him back onto the bed like a piece of trash. He went back to his smiling, gentle self in a heartbeat. "Remember," Ling Feng said cheerfully, "the people on that small peak are monsters. But my peak doesn't raise useless trash either. 300 copies of the scripture of the Yellow Court. Have them on my desk by tomorrow." The next morning was crisp and clear. I was back on the mountain path with Hututu. We were much more comfortable with each other now, chatting as we walked. I was taking her to light her life lamp. Once that flame was lit, she would officially be a member of the Qingyun sect. Usually, the main peak would send a disciple on a white crane to pick up new recruits. But after the mess I caused yesterday, I figured they weren't in a hurry to do me any favors. I had to take her myself. The problem was the main peak was hundreds of miles away. Walking would take forever. My brothers were all busy, one fixing a roof, one healing, and one meditating. Luckily, I've spent 10 years building a massive network of friends. I had sent out a message this morning, and a buddy of mine agreed to give us a lift. We waited at the base of the mountain. I sat on a stone step, sipping some spirit fruit wine I'd brewed myself. Hututu couldn't stay still. She was running around, chasing butterflies and picking flowers like a happy kid. Suddenly, a golden light streaked across the sky, heading straight for us. Before the light even landed, a crisp, melodious voice rang out. "Senior brother Lin Yuan. I'm here." I stood up and straightened my robes. As the light faded, a girl standing on a shimmering white cloud descended toward us. Every time I saw her, I couldn't help but be impressed. Her long hair fell like a black waterfall, tied simply with a red ribbon. She had eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 stories and skin as pale as snow. She looked less like a cultivator and more like a goddess stepping out of a painting. This was my friend, Su Linger. Every move she made radiated elegance. She wore a flowing white dress and looked like a fairy stepping out of a painting. But beyond the grace, she had a presence that balanced purity with a subtle, dangerous charm. She was stunning, with long, snow-white legs and a figure that was hard to ignore. I took a quick peek at her stats through my system. Her name was Su Linger, the eldest disciple of Jade Maiden Peak. Her cultivation was at the 7th level of the nascent soul realm. Her charm was a staggering 9 out of 10. The system's evaluation of her was even more direct, calling her a top-tier cultivation partner who was particularly skilled with a flute. Back in the day, I used her as a guinea pig for my cringy pickup lines. At first, she treated me like a total creep. But after a lot of persistence, I managed to win her over. Now, instead of telling me to get lost, she actually answered my messages. "Junior sister Sue, it's been a while," I said, giving her a polite greeting. She pouted, her lips curving into a dissatisfied frown. She had rushed over the moment she got my message, even though she tried to act like she didn't care. Hearing me be so formal clearly annoyed her. After all, I used to call her Linger. "You're being so distant, senior brother," she said. She hopped down from her cloud and grabbed my arm, leaning in close. "You haven't contacted me in ages. I thought you'd forgotten all about me." I felt the pressure of her leaning against my arm, and my brain momentarily short-circuited. It was a lot to handle. But with my little sister standing right there, I had to keep up appearances. I cleared my throat and came up with a quick lie. "My junior brother was breaking through, so I had to stay and protect him," I explained. The moment I finished, I needed to take my new sister to light her life lamp. "You were the first person I thought of." Su Linger's smile brightened instantly. "Oh, senior brother, you have a stray hair on your shoulder," she whispered. She leaned her head against my shoulder, pretending to brush it off while she took a deep breath, smelling my scent. She had a mischievous little grin on her face. Suddenly, a small face popped up between us. Tutu was staring at her with wide, blinking eyes. Su Linger jumped back, startled. "Senior brother," Tutu said, pointing at Su Linger. "Is this common friend the one taking us to the peak?" She put a lot of emphasis on the words common friend. Su Linger narrowed her eyes. She was experienced enough to see that Tutu was going to grow up into a legendary beauty. A silent alarm went off in her head. She had already fought off all the other girls at Jade Maiden Peak, and now a new rival had appeared right next to me. "Is this the new disciple uncle who recruited?" Su Linger asked, stressing the word little to remind Tutu she was just a child. Tutu wasn't having it. She could sense the hidden jab immediately. Even though she was currently in a child's body, her instincts were sharp. She looked at Su Linger's curves and then down at her own flat chest, biting her lip in frustration. "That's right, sister," Tutu chirped, faking a sweet, innocent tone. "My name is Hututu. I'll be living with senior brother on our peak from now on. We'll be together day and night." That day and night comment hit Su Linger right where it hurt. Being close to me was the one thing she wanted most. I stood there, completely oblivious to the invisible sparks flying between them. They were acting polite, but the air felt thick with tension. They both turned away from each other at the same time with a cold huff. "Sister, the sun is getting high," I said, breaking the silence. "We should probably get going." Su Linger pulled out a jade flute and looked at me with soft, melting eyes. "Senior brother, should I play a song for you on the way?" I coughed into my hand. "Let's focus on the mission first. We can discuss your flute playing in my room later." I wasn't sure my heart could take much more of this. Su Linger tilted her head playfully, acting like she didn't know what I meant, while Tutu looked like she wanted to bite someone. She was fuming. To her, Su Linger was just some fox spirit trying to steal her brother away, which was ironic, considering Tutu was the actual fox. Su Linger waved her hand, and a massive cloud materialized beneath our feet. It lifted us high into the sky, soaring toward the main peak. We covered hundreds of miles in less than an hour. As we approached, the scale of the main peak took my breath away. It was massive and majestic, towering over the landscape. Mist swirled around the cliffs, white cranes circled the summits, and a staircase made of pure white jade stretched up toward the clouds like a ladder to heaven. It was clear the sect put a lot more money into decorating the main peak than they did for our little corner of the mountain. The main peak of the Qingyun sect was a different world entirely. Waterfalls crashed down into crystal-clear rivers, and the air was filled with the scent of rare herbs and exotic flowers. Elegant buildings were scattered across the landscape, perfectly blending majesty with grace. It looked exactly like the legendary home of immortals should look. I walked in the lead, with Su Linger and Hututu following half a step behind me on either side. As we reached the mountain gate, I spotted 2 stone lions perched on bright red lacquered pillars. They were slumped over, snoring away. The moment they sensed us, they jolted awake, shaking stone dust off their manes. They hopped down from the pillars and stood in our way, their eyes squeezed shut with arrogant expressions. "Who goes there?" One of them barked, still not bothering to open its eyes. "State the mountain gate password." I stared at these 2 lazy statues and felt a vein pop in my forehead. I let out a cold laugh. "Come here, lean down, and I'll whisper it to you." The 2 lions tilted their ears and leaned in close. When they finally opened their eyes and saw my face, they froze. I didn't give them a second to process it. I raised my hand and delivered a massive slap right across the lead lion's face. "I'm the one who personally sculpted you bastards," I yelled. "And you have the nerve to ask me for a password? Fine, listen close. The password is, I'm your father. I've never needed a password to walk through this gate." The lion I slapped woke up real fast. It scrambled out of the way, dropping to its knees and bowing low. Suddenly, they weren't majestic guardians anymore. They were acting like obedient puppies, even wagging their stone tails at me. Back when I first started practicing my cultivation techniques, I had carved these 2 out of boredom. I had accidentally left some of my true chi inside them, which gave them life. Over the years, they developed intelligence and were eventually recruited by the old sect master to guard the entrance. Stone spirits are incredibly rare. Once they gain sentience, they usually hide in the deepest parts of the mountains. Using them as doormen was the ultimate flex for the sect, but it seemed these 2 had let the job go to their heads. I took a few steps past them onto the jade stairs, then stopped and turned back. Flying was forbidden on the main peak, and spells were restricted. If I wanted to get to the top, I'd have to use my own 2 feet, and there was no way I was walking that far. The lions, who had just breathed a sigh of relief, stiffened when they saw me return. I pointed at the one I'd slapped. "You, carry us up." The lion gave me a pathetic, human-like grin. "Master, the rules say everyone must walk. It's the law of the peak." I dug my ear with my pinky and looked at him. "I didn't quite hear that. Say it again." The lion's body began to stiffen. He could feel the thread of my true chi inside him starting to evaporate. If that chi left, he'd go back to being a regular, lifeless rock. "I meant to say," the lion stammered, dropping his belly to the floor, "that master's word is the only law. Please, step carefully. Do you need me to lay down flatter?" I snorted and climbed onto his back, followed by the 2 girls. With a powerful leap, the stone lion blurred into motion, vanishing up the white jade staircase. The second lion watched us go, letting out a long breath. Just then, a young disciple tried to follow us through the gate. The stone lion immediately puffed out his chest and put on his serious face again. "Who goes there? Password." The young man had seen my outburst and thought he understood the trick. He smirked and shouted, "The password is, I'm your father." The lion's eyes turned red. His 5-meter-tall body surged, growing until he was over 20 meters high. He slammed a massive stone paw down toward the disciple. The young man turned pale, performed a hand seal, and tried to dive into the earth to escape. "Trying to be clever with me? Seek death," the lion roared. As a stone spirit, he had a natural mastery over the earth. He slammed his paw into the ground, and a muffled scream echoed from below. The disciple was forced out of the dirt, looking like a half-planted turnip, completely trapped by the soil. "Wrong password. You're grounded here for 20 hours, the lion muttered, yawning as he climbed back onto his pillar. The poor disciple looked like he wanted to cry. He was just there to copy some scriptures, but now he was stuck in the dirt. Meanwhile, our lion burst through a layer of clouds and reached the top of the stairs. We hopped off, and the lion looked at me with big, pleading eyes, silently asking if he could leave. He was acting like a total lapdog. I reached out and patted his head, sending a fresh jolt of true chi into his body. The lion's eyes lit up with joy. He actually barked at me twice, licked his stone chops, and sprinted back down the mountain at full speed. I turned around to face the main square. The entire area was paved with high-grade spirit stones that emitted a soft, glowing mist. It felt like walking on a cloud. It was pure extravagance. Outside the sect, rogue cultivators would kill each other over a single low-grade stone. Yet here, they were using them as floor tiles. The square was packed with people. The great sect competition was only a month away, and the atmosphere was electric. Elders from every peak would be there, along with guests from other major sects. It was a massive event held every 5 years, a chance for outer disciples to prove themselves, for inner disciples to show off, and for the Qingyun sect to flex its muscles to the world. Back at our small peak, nobody ever cared about the competition. Lung Qingsong thought it was boring. Bai Feiyu looked down on it. Chen Chongxing hated being seen in public. As for me, I didn't even meet the requirements. To enter, you had to be at least at the foundation establishment stage. I felt a bit bitter thinking about it. It felt like the rule was made specifically to keep me out. Fine by me. I didn't want to join anyway. Senior brother, it's so beautiful here. Hututu gasped. Compared to the caves and dens of the fox tribe, the human cultivators really knew how to live in luxury. Su Linger giggled at her reaction, then turned to me with a look of pure admiration. Senior brother, I heard they're using this competition to choose the holy son of the Qingyun sect. With your talent and wisdom, if you entered, the title would definitely be yours. My face flushed a little. I knew she meant well, but I couldn't even sign up. I gave a dry cough and looked away. I've never cared for such empty titles. We practitioners should view these empty titles as nothing more than passing clouds, I said, keeping my voice steady and profound. Su Linger looked at me with pure admiration. Senior brother, your character is truly noble and selfless. A few disciples nearby overheard us. One of them turned around, scanned my cultivation level, and saw I was only at the qi refining stage. He immediately rolled his eyes and turned back. I could practically hear him thinking, asterisk another qi refining loser acting like a grandmaster. What a joke, asterisk. I felt a sting of embarrassment. Even with my thick skin, being judged like that in public was awkward. I quickly grabbed Su Linger and Hututu, pulling them toward the main hall to escape the stairs. Inside the hall, there weren't any colorful statues of gods like I remembered from my past life. Instead, a simple wooden tablet stood in the center. 2 words were carved into it, in ancient Taoist script, heaven and earth. In this world, people didn't worship ghosts or Buddhas. They only bowed to the world itself. 3 massive sticks of incense burned in a square bronze cauldron, filling the air with a refreshing, crisp scent. Su Linger and I each took 3 sticks of incense. Hututu followed our lead, mimicking our movements with a serious face. We bowed to the tablet and placed the incense into the ash. As she did, I noticed Su Linger's face turn a soft shade of pink. To her, offering incense together probably felt like a couple making a vow before the heavens. After the ceremony, Su Linger stayed in the front hall. Without a key, disciples weren't allowed into the back. I led Hututu alone, bypassing the middle courtyard and heading toward the rear hall. The back hall housed a massive altar. It was covered in countless flickering soul lamps, the lifelights of every inner disciple in the sect. But when we stepped inside, the room was empty. I frowned. Old Lin, the sect leader, was supposed to meet us here. It wasn't like him to stand me up. I looked around, feeling confused, when a dry cough echoed through the room. An old man in a Taoist robe suddenly appeared before us. He held a whisk, his white eyebrows reaching down to his chest. He looked like the perfect image of a transcendent immortal, radiating a mysterious aura with a faint rainbow glow behind his head. This was Dong Shuzi, the sect leader. He looked completely different from the messy old man in a vest I'd seen before. Disciple Lin Yuan greets the sect leader, I said, bowing. Hututu scrambled to follow suit, her voice trembling. Disciple Hututu greets the sect leader. Dong Shuzi glanced at Hututu. I could see the flicker of envy in his eyes. He clearly recognized her heavenly Tao body. He was probably cursing my master, Hu Yun, for having the luck to find yet another monster-tier disciple. Despite his inner jealousy, he maintained a warm, fatherly smile. Good, good. You're here to light the soul lamp. By my master's orders, I replied. I've brought our new disciple, Hututu, to to light her lamp. I asked for the sect leader's permission. Dong Shuzi stroked his beard, smiling brightly. Good. I refuse. I blinked, looking up in confusion. Hututu's face went pale. She looked like she was about to faint, thinking she had somehow offended the most powerful man in the sect. Didn't you hear me, kid? Dong Shuzi chuckled, still stroking his beard. I said no. My temper flared. Under Hututu's horrified gaze, I stepped forward, reached out, and grabbed the sect leader's long white beard. I yanked his face down to mine. Old man, I hissed. I'm being polite. Don't push your luck. Dong Shuzi didn't get angry. He just looked at me with a mischievous glint in his eyes. Oh, were you this tough when your brothers were beating up my disciple? I lowered my voice. That old guy Lin Feng is blind. He took in a demon prince and protected him. Putting that aside, Qin Changsheng was the one who started the fight. Your disciple was rude, so my brother taught him some manners. What's the problem? Taught him manners? Dong Shuzi whispered back, matching my tone. He nearly killed him. Your small peak's rules are bigger than the entire Qingyan sects now. Your disciple is a problem, I countered. Everyone on your peak is a problem child, he snapped. Then he glanced at Hututu and softened his voice. Look, my junior sister is here. Give me some face. I'm the sect leader. How does it look if you're pulling my beard? What do you want? I asked, losing patience. Go back and talk to your brother, Dong Shuzi said. Tell him to drop the grudge. I groaned. I want to, but he already made a heavenly Tao oath. It's out of my hands. Then lighting this lamp is out of my hands too, the old man said, playing dirty. I stared at him. This old geezer had been arguing with me since I was a kid, and I had never won a single verbal spar. Pick something else, I said. I can't do that. If you keep pushing, we'll just leave the sect and start our own. Dong Shuzi finally revealed his true goal. The Great Sect competition is next month. I need a dragon and a phoenix to show off and boost our prestige. No way, I said, shaking my head. You know that creating those things draws heavenly tribulation. Dong Shuzi got loud then. This is no, that is no. My disciple gets beaten for nothing, and you want favors? Forget the lamp. Go light a ghost instead. He was fully committed to being a brat. I sighed, defeated. Fine, fine. Next month, I'll give you a dragon and a phoenix. The deal was struck. Dong Shuzi instantly snatched his beard back and returned to his wholly immortal persona. He looked at Hututu with a kind smile. You have great talent, child. Huyin found another good one. Come with me. Hututu stood there, frozen. She looked at the sect leader, then at me, her eyes wide with shock. This was the leader of one of the 9 great sacred lands, one of the most powerful cultivators in the world, and her senior brother had just been yanking on his beard and cursing at him. And the sect leader didn't even care. She rubbed her eyes, wondering if she was hallucinating. I nodded to her, and she nervously followed him to the altar. I stepped out of the hall and closed the doors, sitting down on the stone steps outside. Dong Shuzi was more than just the sect leader to me. He was practically a second master. My own master was always wandering off, leaving the peak abandoned. When Lung Qingsong and I first arrived, the mountain was a wasteland. Dong Shuzi was the one who helped us build the paths and the houses. We were so close that he'd even borrowed the 2 stone lions from our front gate and never brought them back. The dragon and phoenix, I promised him, were just like those lions, creations made from my own energy. The problem was, making things that carried the aura of divine beasts tended to piss off the heavens. I was going to have to deal with some serious lightning next month. I once tried to create a divine beast out of pure energy, just because I was curious. I almost died. Follow your heart. If you ever betray these vows, your cultivation will be stripped, and you will be cast out. Hututu nodded. She had expected 1,000 complex rules, but these were simple. They had nothing to do with her being a fox spirit. She could keep these promises easily. Dong Shuzi waved his whisk again. A single strand of hair drifted from Hututu's head into the lamp. A blue flame erupted. It flickered into the shape of a tiny fox, jumped once, and then settled into a normal flame. Hututu's heart nearly stopped. Was her secret out? But Dong Shuzi didn't even blink. He just smiled. All done. You can go now. She let out a long, silent breath. He hadn't noticed. Her confidence returned, and she looked up at him with wide eyes. Sect leader Grandpa, Are everyone's soul lamps here? He nodded. Every single person in the Qingyan sect. She looked around curiously. What does my big senior brother's lamp look like? Dong Shuzi's face stiffened. Why would you want to see that brat's lamp? There's nothing to see. But she persisted, tugging at his sleeve and begging until he gave in. He reached out, and a lamp flew from the altar. Hututu gasped. Compared to the bright lights surrounding it, this flame was pathetic. It was tiny, flickering, and looked like a single breeze would snuff it out forever. Why? Why is it like this? She stammered. Outside, I was still sitting on the steps, flipping through my book. A water dragon and a fire phoenix. That's what the old man wanted. In this world, energy is everything. You use your internal chi to command the energy of the world. High-level cultivators can change the weather, flip mountains, or turn day into night. It's terrifying stuff. I didn't understand any of that. My version of spells involved clapping my hands and shouting what I wanted to happen. The problem was, I forgot how to do them almost immediately. I had used the water dragon spell just the other day, and now? Nothing. Blank. My talent for cultivation was so bad it felt like a disease. The doors creaked open. Dong Shuzi and Hututu walked out. I went to ask how it went, but I stopped dead. Hututu's eyes were red and puffy. She had been crying. I didn't hesitate. I lunged forward and grabbed Dong Shuzi's beard again. You old geezer. I already agreed to your deal. Why did you mess with her? Ow. Ow. Stop it, he yelled, trying to pry my fingers off. Ask her first. This has nothing to do with me. Senior brother, it's not his fault, Hututu sobbed. She grabbed the hem of my robe, her voice trembling. Can we just go back to our peak? I want to go home. I looked at her, then slowly let go of the beard. I picked her up, tucking her into my arms. Don't worry, Tutu. I'm here. If any of these old farts try to bully you, tell me. I'll handle them. I glared at Dong Shuzi. You're basically pointing at me, you brat, he snapped. He sighed, then reached into his robe and pulled out a paper crane. He handed it to Hututu. I'm technically your senior uncle. Since this is our first meeting, take this. Hututu took it shyly. Thank you, sect leader grandpa uncle. I rolled my eyes. You're so cheap. A piece of scrap paper for a first meeting gift. Get out. Both of you. Dong Shuzi barked, waving us away. I get a headache just looking at you. With a flick of his whisk, he vanished. Stingy old man, I muttered. Just like master. I looked down at the paper crane in Hututu's hand and paused. I felt a familiar trace of chi coming from it. It was the same crane he had used to send me a message yesterday. The old man really was a cheapskate. He was regifting his trash. The paper crane in my hand suddenly fluttered its wings. It took flight, circling around me as if it recognized who I was. Hututu watched it with wide, curious eyes. She reached out a hand, and the crane obediently landed on her palm. Suddenly, a flash of white light blinded us. The crane vanished. Hututu gasped, staring at her index finger. A tiny, intricate tattoo of a paper crane was now etched onto her fingernail. Senior brother, this paper crane is actually a Dharma treasure, she cried out, her voice full of surprise and joy. A Dharma treasure? I frowned. That old man must have refined it again after it flew back to him yesterday. In this world, treasures are everything. They are divided into 5 ranks: magic tools, Dharma treasures, spirit treasures, Tao artifacts, and Tao treasures. A Tao treasure is incredibly rare. Even a powerhouse like the Qingyun sect couldn't resist the temptation of one. They contain the essence of the great Tao, enough to turn a regular person into a legendary immortal. I'd seen plenty of tools in my time, but I'd only ever seen one spirit treasure, a sword my master brought back for my second brother. He loved that thing so much he practically slept with it. I, on the other hand, was stuck with a piece of rope that wasn't even a magic tool. Since I've been stuck at the chi refining stage for 10,000 years, I can't even use basic artifacts. Tutu, call it out, I said. She nodded and closed her eyes. With a shimmer of white light, the crane reappeared. I took it from her and began funneling my chi into it. The crane reacted instantly, soaking up my energy like a thirsty fish finding water. It chirped happily, absorbing my chi until it couldn't hold any more. It took exactly 1,000 points of my chi. For most people, Losing that much permanently would be a disaster. But for me, I gained that much just by standing around doing nothing. Though, now that I thought about it, my AFK system hadn't given me a notification in 2 days. It was taking its sweet time. The crane began to glow with a brilliant white radiance. Suddenly, it threw its head back and let out a sharp, crystalline cry. It had evolved. Right there in my hands, it transformed from a Dharma treasure into a spirit treasure. It had gained its own consciousness. If the world knew I could upgrade treasures by hand, the other 8 great sacred lands would probably team up to kidnap me just to slice me open and study me. I knew the truth, though. Dong Shuzi had already used top-tier materials to build it. I just provided the spark to wake it up. I couldn't just turn any random piece of paper into a treasure, or I'd be the richest man in the world by now. Still, what I did was unheard of. Crafting a spirit treasure is a nightmare. You need rare materials, complex formations, and a master blacksmith who doesn't make a single mistake. Even then, it takes thousands of years for a treasure to develop a spirit of its own. Many elders in our sect didn't even own one. Hututu was beaming. Her first treasure was a spirit treasure. She poured her demonic energy into it, and the palm-sized crane expanded instantly. It grew until it was 3 meters tall and 5 meters long. "Senior brother, little crane says he can carry us," she shouted, hopping onto its back. "Let's go home." "Wait, what about junior sister Su Ling?" I asked. I didn't want to lose my favorite tool, helper, just yet. "Don't worry about her," Tutu said quickly, her eyes darting around. "She can fly on her own. She probably left already." I could tell she didn't want the big cow coming with us, but I sent a message to Su Linger anyway. A moment later, her voice came through my communication jade. "Senior brother, the Peak Master is making me stay here to handle the arrangements for next month's sect competition. It's so annoying. I haven't even had the chance to play the flute for you yet." Her sweet, pure voice made my heart skip a beat. I gave a wicked little grin. "It's fine. You can play for me next time. You can play mine." "You have a flute too, senior brother?" she asked, sounding delighted. "I didn't know you played. We really are a match made in heaven." I could almost hear her giggling like a love-struck girl on the other end. I felt a bit bad for the disciples standing near her, watching their goddess make such a face. But since she was stuck at the main peak, it was time for us to head back to our own mountain. Hututu let out a cheer and practically dragged me onto the paper crane. As we hopped on, the little bird wobbled for a second before taking flight toward our home at the small peak. A transparent barrier shimmered into existence around us, blocking the freezing wind as we soared through the clouds. Tutu was bouncing around like a kid with a new toy, her face glowing with excitement. But as she looked at me, her smile suddenly flickered and died. She remembered what the sect master, Dong Shuzi, had told her earlier. She leaned in close, resting her head against my chest, and whispered in a tiny, trembling voice, "Senior brother, I don't want you to die." I stared at her, completely baffled. I knew that old geezer Dong Shuzi must have been talking trash behind my back. "Don't listen to that old man's nonsense," I said, patting her head. "I'm perfectly fine. I'm not going anywhere." Tutu didn't answer. She just rubbed her face against my robe like a lonely kitten. Back in the main hall, Dong Shuzi had shown her my life lamp. He explained that the size of the flame represents a cultivator's vitality. Most immortals have long lives, so their lamps burn like torches. But mine? My flame was weak. It was better than a normal human's, but for a cultivator, it was pathetic. He told her that I struggled just to light the lamp in the first place. To him, it was a sign that my talent was the worst he'd ever seen. He believed I'd never even reach the golden core stage. Without a golden core, I wouldn't get the 500-year life extension most cultivators enjoy. To a man like Dong Shuzi, who had lived for thousands of years, I was just a flash in the pan. Tutu had tried to argue. She told him I was incredibly strong. But the old man just shook his head. He said strength doesn't matter if you only live 100 years. To a tribulation transcendence expert, a century is nothing but a blink of an eye. I had seen Dong Shuzi's stats through my system. He was a monster. Level 9 tribulation stage, with perfect 10s in every category: roots, charm, luck, and sword talent. He was the ultimate genius of his era. "Brother," Tutu whispered to herself, squinting at the sun. I definitely won't let you die. The paper crane was fast. It was twice as quick as Su Linger's clouds. Before long, the familiar sights of the small peak appeared on the horizon. But as we prepared to land, two massive pillars of sword intent shot into the sky. The air above the mountain felt like it was being shredded to pieces. I rubbed my temples. I didn't even have to look to know that Lung Qingsong and Bai Feiyu were at it again. These rebellious brothers of mine couldn't go a single day without causing trouble. The crane touched down in the courtyard. Tutu jumped off, waving her arms and shouting for everyone to look at her new treasure. But nobody paid her any attention. Lung Qingsong and Bai Feiyu were locked in a silent, deadly standoff. Our fourth brother, Chen Changsheng, stood off to the side, shaking his head with a helpless sigh. Tutu looked disappointed that her grand entrance was ignored. She spotted Hu Yun, our master who currently looked like a grumpy Tibetan fox, walking by. She grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and shoved the paper crane in his face. "Look, handsome. Look at the treasure the sect master gave me." Hu Yun stared at the crane with a blank expression. As a tribulation-level expert, a spirit treasure didn't mean much to him, but he was impressed by the sect's wealth. Still, he looked mostly annoyed at being handled like a pet. I walked over to Chen Changsheng. "What happened this time?" I asked, sounding exhausted. "What are these two idiots fighting about now?" Changsheng looked at me and sighed. "Well, after I took that heavenly oath yesterday, third brother said my sword skills were trash. He offered to teach me." I already knew where this was going. Bai Feiyu, the reincarnated sword immortal, believes that the sword is in the heart and that everything in nature can be a blade. It's a path of perfection and balance. But Lung Qingsong, his path is the complete opposite. He believes the sword is nothingness, a tool meant only for killing. He doesn't want to master the sword. He wants to be the sword. Bai Feiyu had told Changsheng to polish his heart to make his defense unbreakable. Lung Qingsong had interrupted him with 3 simple words: "The sword is void." Bai Feiyu called Qingsong's path dangerous and prone to madness. Qingsong called Bai Feiyu a mediocre talent. Bai Feiyu called him a heretic. Qingsong called him a loser. Their egos were like oil and fire. Within seconds, they had forgotten all about teaching poor Changsheng and had drawn their blades. As for Changsheng, he didn't actually care about the path. He just wanted whatever technique worked best to keep him alive. If he could fire off a sword light, he was happy. I watched them for a moment, my patience snapping. I was used to the chaos, but I wasn't in the mood today. I let my internal energy surge and threw my hands out. "Both of you get lost." A massive wave of raw power exploded from me, physically sweeping both of them off their feet. The two sword geniuses were tumbled through the air like rag dolls, tossed straight off the peak and down to the foot of the mountain. They hit the ground at the base of the hill, scrambled to their feet, and immediately glared at each other. Their swords began to hum with murderous intent again. Within seconds, the sound of clashing steel and exploding sword chi echoed from below. I looked down at them, feeling like a tired parent of unruly toddlers. I turned around just in time to see Chen Changsheng trying to sneak away quietly. I reached out and grabbed Chen Changsheng before he could slip away. I wasn't done with him yet. "Are you confident about the Great Sect tournament next month?" I asked. I was genuinely worried. His opponent was Zhu Yuan, the saint son of the demon race. In every story I'd ever read, guys like that had a nasty habit of bursting with power at the last second. They'd be down to their last drop of blood, scream something about friendship or hidden potential, and suddenly hit full health to crush the final boss. Looking at Zhu Yuan's attribute panel, the guy was practically a child of destiny. Changsheng hesitated. He looked down, thinking hard. "My chances aren't great," he admitted. "Maybe 40%. 40%. I stared at him, shocked. That high? To anyone else, 40% sounded like a losing gamble. But I knew how Changsheng's mind worked. He was the most cautious dog cultivator I had ever met. When I asked if he was confident, he didn't mean confident in winning a fair fight. He meant he was 40% sure he could kill Zhu Yuan even if the sect leader intervened, even if the elders tried to stop him, and even if Zhu Yuan burst with power 4 or 5 times in a row. Changsheng shook his head seriously. "That's an optimistic estimate. I haven't seen the sect leader fight yet. If he actually steps in, my win rate drops significantly." I sighed. I knew it. This kid's brain was wired differently. His persecution complex was so severe he had already hollowed out the entire mountain with traps and escape tunnels. I'd learned 3 golden rules living on this peak. First, don't be surprised by how many times Lung Chingsong realizes a new sword intent. Second, don't underestimate how fast Bai Feiyu breaks through his cultivation ranks. And third, never, ever, try to imagine what kind of terrifying weapon Changsheng is hiding up his sleeve. The Great Sect Tournament happened every 5 years. It wasn't just a big deal for us. It was the event of the year for the entire cultivation world. Hundreds of smaller sects would come to watch. The other 8 great holy lands would send representatives. It was the ultimate stage for geniuses to show off. Even though the main event was a month away, the battle among the outer disciples had already started. There were hundreds of thousands of them, all under 18, fighting for a spot in the inner sect. If they didn't make the cut by 18, they were sent home to live ordinary lives. Most of them would rather die than go back to being commoners. It was the most competitive, high-pressure environment I'd ever seen. On a mountain path near the outer sect, I saw a young man with bronzed skin and a bare chest. He was carrying a massive log on his shoulders. Every step he took left a shallow footprint in the solid green stone. His name was Xiao Feng. He had a face that screamed stubbornness and a massive, centipede-like scar running across his chest. The log he carried was ironwood, weighing over 100,000 pounds. He had been doing this every single day for 5 years. "Junior brother," another student called out, stopping him. "The tournament is in a month. You can't just keep training your body. If you can't even draw qi into your marrow, you'll never get anywhere. Give it up and try meditating again." Xiao Feng didn't stop. People used to mock him. But after 5 years of watching him carry that log through rain and snow without a single day of rest, the mockery had turned into silent respect. "I have to keep going," Xiao Feng muttered, his voice low and raspy. The other student sighed and walked away. Xiao Feng's eyes flashed with a cold, sharp determination. I knew his story. His roots had been stolen. His parents were murdered, his brothers had betrayed him, and his fiancée had publicly humiliated him. He was the walking definition of a protagonist seeking revenge. One day, he intended to take back everything he lost. I stood on top of a bell tower overlooking the outer sect entrance, letting out a long, bored yawn. An older man stood beside me, bowing slightly with a polite smile on his face. I looked down at the swarming crowds of disciples below, still feeling like I hadn't slept nearly enough. The chaos was only just beginning. My head throbbed. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me as I looked out at the massive crowd. Every time the outer sect held their competition, one of the main peaks had to send someone to supervise. This time, it was my peak's turn. My 3 monster, younger brothers had zero interest in watching a bunch of low-level disciples fight like chickens in a coop. Hututu actually wanted to come along, but this was a formal event involving the inner sect's reputation, so I decided to leave her behind. I came alone to act as a lucky charm. Standing beside me was an older man with a face full of smiles. He was the manager of the outer sect. Don't let his polite bowing fool you. Among the outer disciples, he was known as the Iron-Faced Tiger. He controlled the monthly resource distribution based on contribution points. In the world of cultivation, if you don't have resources, you don't move forward. He held the power of life and death over these disciples. Right now, he was bowing and scraping to me. It wasn't because of who I was, but because of the Qingyun sect peak I represented. I looked half asleep and turned to him with a lazy yawn. "Senior brother Lin Yuan, please, bear with the chaos," he said, his voice dripping with respect. I exchanged a few fake pleasantries with Old Sun before turning my gaze back to the bustling crowd below. My vision was swimming with thousands of floating system panels. It was a mess. I scanned through them for a long time, but didn't see any promising talent. I was about ready to find a quiet corner for a nap when a massive log caught my eye. A shirtless youth was marching toward the registration desk, a giant piece of timber balanced on his shoulder. A panel flared to life in front of my eyes. Name: Xiao Feng. Physique: Earth stance. Cultivation: comparable to Foundation establishment. Roots: 0. Charm: 8. Luck: 8. Body refinement talent: 11. Special skill: unyielding will. Evaluation, a classic trash tier, tragic protagonist start. Roots at 0? How is that even possible? Even a talentless hack like me had a root score of 1. I leaned in, suddenly very interested. Why was he labeled a trash tier protagonist? Just because his last name was Xiao. And that earth stance physique sounded like a joke. But that body refinement talent, it actually broke the limit of 10. Just as I was wondering if I had found another son of destiny, a roar shook the air. 30 years east. 30 years west. Do not bully the youth for being poor. My eyes narrowed. I knew it. Anyone who shouted that line was a protagonist through and through. Come on, old son, I said, a grin tugging at my lips. Let's go take a look. Manager's son kept his smile, but I saw a flash of irritation in his eyes. He felt like he was losing face because he couldn't keep his disciples under control in front of me. We walked down to the registration desk. Xiaofeng was standing there shirtless, pointing a finger at a young man who was calmly sipping tea behind the desk. The crowd was whispering. I grabbed a nearby disciple who looked like he was enjoying the drama. Hey, brother, what's going on? The disciple didn't even turn his head. He was too busy watching the show. Didn't you see? Xiaofeng tried to register, but the guy behind the desk won't let him. He's just mocking him. Eating melons and watching drama is human nature, and I was a professional at it. What happened? Do they have a grudge? Grudge? Nah, the disciple sighed. Xiaofeng has been carrying that log up and down the mountain every day for 5 years. Most people think he's just doing it for attention so he can get into the inner sect. Still, 5 years without missing a day. I couldn't do it. He's got grit, I muttered, looking at the boy with growing appreciation. Grit doesn't fix broken roots, the disciple whispered. His roots were dug out. His dantian was destroyed. He's destined to never cultivate. A former genius reduced to this. It's a shame. Everything clicked. No wonder the system gave him that evaluation. This backstory sounded like a novel I'd read 100 times in my past life. The tension in the clearing spiked. Xiaofeng's eyes were bloodshot. His fists were clenched so hard the veins in his arms looked like they might burst. He had spent 5 years of blood and sweat for this one chance, only to be met with humiliation. Ah! Xiaofeng let out a guttural roar. He swung his fist back and smashed it into the ironwood log behind him. A heavy, sickening crack echoed through the square. The ironwood, a material harder than steel, snapped clean in two. The crowd gasped. He broke ironwood with one punch. Must be a trick. He probably sawed it halfway through beforehand. The tea-drinking disciple behind the desk didn't look impressed. He stood up and scoffed. Breaking a log is impressive for a circus act, kid. But look at your hand, you're bleeding. I could do that with one wind blade. It's not cultivation. He set his tea down and looked around at the crowd. Look, it's not that I'm being mean. The rules say you have to be at least at the chi refining stage to enter the competition. You can't even gather chi. If I let you in, you'll just get killed. The outer sect trials are bloodbaths. He wasn't wrong. The outer sect fights were brutal and often ended in death. It was a rule meant to protect the weak. Xiaofeng didn't say a word. His eyes were red as he turned to pick up his broken log, ready to walk away. If the Qingyun sect had no place for him, he would find somewhere else. The world was big. Wait a second, I called out. My voice cut through the noise, drawing every eye in the square. Xiaofeng stopped and looked at me, his expression cold and empty. I smiled. We all saw this junior brother's strength, I said loudly. I think he deserves a chance. The tea-drinking disciple frowned. He had just convinced the crowd, and now someone was contradicting him. He sensed my cultivation was only at the 9th level of chi refining, lower than his own foundation establishment level. He opened his mouth to bark a shut up, but then he saw Manager's son standing right behind me. The disciple turned pale and jumped to his feet, bowing low. Manager's son, I didn't see you there. Son nodded. Technically, the disciple was following the rules. But I had spoken, and Son wasn't about to embarrass me. What did it matter if a trash disciple registered anyway? He'd just lose in the first round. Our sect accepts all who are willing, Manager's son announced, his voice booming. I've seen this boy's strength myself. It's enough. Register him. The disciple in charge of registrations heard Manager's son's order and nodded immediately. He didn't dare argue. Xiaofeng, still clutching the 2 pieces of his broken ironwood, looked at me with wide eyes. He gave me a deep, solemn nod and cupped his fists in gratitude. "Thank you, senior brother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I smiled back. "Don't thank me yet. I just got you a spot. If you want to make it into the top 10 of the outer sect, you'll have to rely on your own strength." Xiaofeng straightened his back. "Don't worry, senior brother. If I fail, it's because I'm useless. I won't blame anyone else." I watched him walk away, the heavy logs balanced on his shoulders. He moved with a slow, steady determination. Manager's son watched him go, too, but his expression was sour. He turned to me, sounding a bit annoyed. "You seem very invested in that boy, Lin Yuan. A minute ago, you said you were just here to go through the motions. Now you're jumping in to interfere. You say one thing and do another." I chuckled. I knew how to smooth things over. I reached into my sleeve and pressed a high-grade spirit stone into his hand. I was a bit impulsive just now. "Don't take it to heart, old Sunday." Sun felt the weight and the pure energy radiating from the stone. His frown vanished instantly. He tucked it away so fast it practically disappeared into thin air. I see you just have a sharp eye for talent, Lin Yuan. No harm done at all." We chatted for a bit before he took me to the cafeteria for lunch. As fate would have it, we spotted Xiaofeng sitting alone in a corner, quietly eating his meal. Sun glanced at him, then back at me. "Seriously, why do you care so much about this kid?" I leaned back, a mysterious smile on my lips. "Old Sun, want to make a bet?" "A bet on what?" "2 high-grade spirit stones," I said, looking over at Xiaofeng. "I bet he's about to say something very specific." Sun looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but he couldn't resist the wager. "Fine. What do you think he's going to say?" I thought about all those classic, over-the-top lines from the web novels I used to read. He's going to say, "My fate is mine to control, not the heavens." The next day, the outer sect competition began in earnest. I stayed at the sect to watch the matches from the high bell tower. It was supposed to ensure fairness, but mostly it was just a chore. I watched the disciples below giving it their all. To the crowd, it was thrilling. To me, it was boring. Most of them were only at the chi refining stage. A few prodigies had hit foundation establishment, but the fights were clumsy. They'd spit out a tiny fireball, summon a weak water arrow, or swing their swords with basic techniques. Compared to the monsters I had back at my own peak, these kids looked like they were playing house. I was actually starting to doze off. Then, Xiaofeng stepped onto the stage wearing a yellow training suit. My interest peaked, but it quickly turned to disappointment. Even though Xiaofeng had the classic protagonist attitude, he had 0 combat experience. His opponent was a young man at the 5th level of chi refining. Xiaofeng spent the first few minutes scrambling. He dodged fireballs and water arrows by the skin of his teeth. He tripped, he fell, and he looked completely overwhelmed. "It seems your protege isn't as impressive as you thought," Manager's son remarked, sipping his tea. To him, Xiaofeng's defeat was only a matter of time. I shook my head. "The dust hasn't settled yet. Don't jump to conclusions." On the stage, Xiaofeng's clothes were charred, and his hair smelled like burnt smoke. His opponent started to relax. He had heard rumors that Xiaofeng could break ironwood with one punch, but seeing him run around like a scared rat, the boy lost his caution. "Surrender, junior brother," the boy shouted. "If I don't hold back, you'll get hurt." Xiaofeng stopped running. He wiped the soot from his face and smiled. "Is that so? Then I guess I'll stop holding back, too." The boy's face darkened. Arrogant. He performed a quick series of hand seals. A water dragon erupted from behind him, its blue head lunging forward to bite Xiaofeng. This time, Xiaofeng didn't run. He charged straight at it. The crowd gasped as the 5-meter-long dragon clamped its jaws onto Xiaofeng's arm. Some people even closed their eyes, expecting to see blood spray across the stage. But the dragon didn't bite through. It didn't even break the skin. Xiaofeng grabbed the dragon's head with his bare hand and slammed it into the ground. The opponent tried to force the dragon to break free, but Xiaofeng's strength was nonsensical. He pinned the thrashing beast down like he was wrestling a common snake. Then, he raised a fist. One punch, and the water dragon exploded into a cloud of mist. Xiaofeng stood up, his breathing perfectly calm. He looked at the stunned boy. "Senior brother, you should surrender." Otherwise, I won't be able to hold back. The boy panicked. He fumbled with his robes, trying to pull out a stack of talismans, but Xiao Feng was too fast. He blurred across the stage and buried a fist in the boy's stomach. The opponent's eyes went wide. He couldn't even scream. He just collapsed, clutching his gut. One punch. A 5th-level Qi refining cultivator, gone. Xiao Feng stood in the center of the ring and looked around at the silent crowd. For 5 years, he had been the trash of the sect. For 5 years, he had suffered in silence. Do you know how I've spent the last 5 years? He muttered to himself. Today, his hard work was finally paying off. The rest of the day was a slaughter. Every time Xiao Feng stepped up, the fight ended the same way. No matter what spells his opponents used, he would simply close the gap with incredible speed and end it with a single, unadorned punch. No flashy moves. Just raw, overwhelming power. He was like a god of war on that stage. His ranks skyrocketed, climbing from the bottom of the list into the top 20. But Xiao Feng wasn't aiming for the top 10. He was aiming for the very top. Xiao Feng wasn't looking for a spot in the top 10. He wanted the throne. But to get there, he had to face the mountain standing in his path, Ma Xingye. Ma Xingye was the undisputed #1 in the outer sect. He was only 16, but he was already at the 7th level of the foundation establishment stage. He was the young master of a wealthy family, a literal prince among cultivators. His earth escape techniques were legendary. Compared to the Qi refining opponents Xiao Feng had crushed, Ma Xingye's power was on a completely different level. Xiao Feng charged. He threw a heavy punch at Ma Xingye's protective barrier. The golden shield rippled, absorbing the impact, but it didn't break. Instead, a sharp stone spike erupted from the ground, slamming into Xiao Feng's chest and sending him flying. While Xiao Feng was still in the air, Ma Xingye didn't give him a second to breathe. He swung his long sword, sending dozens of sharp sword-chi arcs slicing through the sky. Xiao Feng crossed his arms to protect his face, but the blades bit deep. Blood sprayed everywhere. His toughened skin, which had felt like iron against weaker students, was being shredded like paper. Before Xiao Feng could even hit the ground, a massive stone hand erupted from the stage. It snatched him out of the air and squeezed. Xiao Feng was pinned, his ribs groaning under the pressure. It's over, Ma Xingye said with a smirk. He kept his hand extended, controlling the stone grip. Body cultivation is a minor path, Xiao Feng. Without foundation establishment, you are nothing but an ant. Ma Xingye had watched Xiao Feng fight earlier like a god of war, so he wasn't taking any chances. He put everything into that restraint. He looked at the struggling boy and felt a wave of relief. The monster was finally trapped. Inside the stone fist, Xiao Feng's blood boiled. Veins popped out on his forehead. He looked like he was about to explode. Am I going to lose? He thought. No, not after coming this far. My fate belongs to me, not to the heavens. A guttural roar ripped from his throat. His bones began to creak and pop. A massive shockwave of pure physical energy erupted from his body. With a deafening crack, the solid stone hand shattered into dust. Ma Xingye stumbled back, his eyes wide with terror. Up in the bell tower, Ouyang laughed and clapped his hands. He looked like a man who had just won a bet, watching Xiao Feng with genuine admiration. How? Ma Xingye hissed. That was a high-level foundation spell. He felt a surge of pure shame. He was the young master of the Blue Wind sect, a genius who had been superior to everyone since birth. To be pushed back by a boy with no cultivation was an insult he couldn't endure. Die! Ma Xingye screamed. He pointed his sword at Xiao Feng, pouring every drop of his internal energy into one final move. 2 more stone hands rose, followed by a massive, 30-foot-tall stone golem. It was a stone general, a puppet with the strength of the core formation stage. Ma Xingye stood atop the golem's head, his face pale from exhaustion. Stone general. Execute him. The golem raised a massive stone axe and swung it down with enough force to split the mountain. Break! Xiao Feng screamed. His muscles were twitching unnaturally, fueled by a surge of blood qi that felt bottomless. He didn't dodge. He jumped. He met the massive axe head-on with a bare fist. The collision shook the entire arena. Dust and debris turned the stage into a gray cloud. When the wind finally cleared the air, the crowd gasped. The giant golem was gone. It had been reduced to a pile of rubble and sand. Xiaofeng stood in the center of the wreckage. He looked like a nightmare. Blood was seeping from all 360 pressure points on his body, turning him into a literal man of gore. Ma Xingye was slumped on the ground, shaking. He had used a forbidden treasure to summon that golem. It was supposed to be invincible against anyone in the outer sect, and this freak had destroyed it with one punch. Monster, Ma Xingye whispered. Xiaofeng started to move. His steps were heavy, like a mountain walking. Each footfall sounded like a drum. He moved slowly, every inch forward clearly costing him an agonizing amount of effort. To Ma Xingye, he didn't look like a student anymore. He looked like a vengeful ghost crawling out of hell to claim a soul. Stay back. Get away from me. Ma Xingye panicked. He swung his sword wildly, firing off weak arcs of sword chi. They hit Xiaofeng, opening new cuts on his chest, but the boy didn't even flinch. He just kept coming. The entire audience was silent. They had gone from mocking him to being stunned, and finally, to pure respect. They were watching a man use his very life force to defend his pride. Xiaofeng's vision was blurring. His world was spinning. Only his sheer will kept his legs moving. Ma Xingye was completely drained, unable to even lift a finger. In a fair fight, the moment Xiaofeng reached him, it would be over. Xiaofeng finally stood over him. He slowly, painfully, raised a trembling fist. It was a weak, slow punch, but it was enough. I'm going to lose, Ma Xingye thought, his eyes darting toward the bell tower in desperation. Suddenly, a ripple of air, too fast for any student to see, shot down from the tower. It slammed into Xiaofeng's side like an invisible hammer. Xiaofeng's exhausted body was thrown across the stage. He hit the ground and didn't move. He was out cold. The crowd erupted in confusion. 1 second Xiaofeng was about to win. The next he was flying through the air. Ma Xingye let out a ragged breath of relief. His gifts to the sect elders had paid off. It didn't matter how it happened. A win was a win. Manager Sun's voice boomed from the bell tower, cold and final. The winner, Ma Xingye. Xiaofeng never stood back up. The fight was over. He had lost by the narrowest of margins, and the crowd was buzzing. I heard the whispers drifting up to the bell tower. Some felt sorry for him. Others were stunned by his hidden strength. Just yesterday, they were calling him a useless ant, but now they saw his potential. Luck is part of strength, one student muttered. But that kid has a future. Didn't you call him trash yesterday? Another retorted. The winner was Ma Xingye, but every eye in the arena was on the unconscious Xiaofeng. He was the one who had truly shocked the sect. Up in the bell tower, I watched Xiaofeng's limp body with a blank expression. Beside me, Manager Sun was beaming. He thought he'd played it perfectly. Senior brother Ouyang, it looks like you won the bet, Sun said, his voice dripping with fake politeness. What a match. Thanks to you, this hidden gem wasn't overlooked. Here, for top-grade spirit stones. Consider it a thank you. He handed me a small pouch, smiling like a fox. I knew exactly what he'd done. That ripple of air that knocked Xiaofeng out? That was Sun's win magic. He had cheated to ensure the result he wanted. I didn't look at him. I just reached out and slap. The sound of my hand hitting Sun's face echoed across the tower. He stumbled back, his smile vanishing into a mask of pure shock. Oh, Manager Sun, I cried out, feigning surprise. I'm so sorry. I was watching the match so intently, I didn't even realize you were standing there. Sun's face twisted. He rubbed his cheek, his eyes turning cold and mocking. It's fine, he said, his voice dropping the act. I was too abrupt. But senior brother, don't be too angry. Everyone has their place. For instance, a foundation establishment cultivator can't exactly slap a golden core elder, can they? He was mocking my cultivation level. He was reminding me that even though I was an inner sect disciple, I was technically weaker than him. He thought he was untouchable. I gave him a sincere smile. You're absolutely right, Manager Sun. I suppose that's why you're over 300 years old and still stuck doing chores in the outer sect. You really know your place. I didn't wait for his reaction. I headed straight for the infirmary. When I got there, Xiaofeng bolted upright in bed. I can't lose. I have to avenge them, he screamed. Then he groaned, his face turning pale as every muscle in his body screamed in pain. He collapsed back onto the pillows. Waking up already? You're a stubborn one, I said, leaning against the doorframe. He glared at me through the pane. Who are you? The name's Ouyang. I'm the one who saved your life. You really pushed it, kid. Broken meridians, shattered bones. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be breathing. Xiaofeng closed his eyes. I will repay this debt. Now leave. I want to rest. I felt a vein pop in my forehead. This kid had the exact same attitude as my brother by Feiyu when he first arrived. Arrogant, cold, and acting like the world owed him a favor. I don't tolerate that crap. I walked over, ripped the blanket off him, and grabbed him by the throat, hoisting him up. Repay the debt? Great. Let's start with the medical bill. 10 top-grade spirit stones. Pay up. Xiaofeng gasped, his eyes wide. What? What medical bill? The pills I gave you. The ointments. You think high-level medicine grows on trees? I growled, pulling him close to my face. He swallowed hard. He had spent 5 years training in isolation. He didn't have a single low-grade stone to his name, let alone 10 top-grade ones. I'll owe you, he muttered, frowning. I'll pay you back 1,000 times over in the future. With what? I scoffed. You almost died fighting a Foundation establishment loser. You really think you're something special? He went quiet, closing his eyes again. He'd heard these insults for years. They didn't hurt him anymore. But I wasn't done. Let's see. I mused, changing my tone. Stolen roots? Murdered parents? Betrayed by brothers? Fiancé broke off the engagement? Which one is it? Or is it all of them? Xiaofeng's eyes snapped open. Who are you? How do you know about that? I chuckled. He really did have the full set of protagonist tropes. The buffs were stacked high on this one. He looked at me with pure rage, convinced I was some enemy sent to exploit him. I tossed him back onto the bed. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that after 5 years, this is all you've achieved. How long do you think it'll take to get your revenge at this rate? He started barking insults at me, calling me a hypocrite and telling me to just kill him. He was losing his mind with anger. I just laughed. I pulled out a white jade bottle and popped a pill into his mouth, forcing his jaw shut so he'd swallow. He tried to spit it out, but then he froze. A warm current rushed through his limbs. The agonizing pain vanished. Within seconds, he was 70% healed. His eyes went wide. A pill that could heal injuries that severe, that fast? It had to be at least a 7th-grade spirit medicine. He looked at me, completely baffled. Was I an enemy? A savior? He couldn't figure me out. Then, I let it leak. I released a tiny fraction of my true aura. The air in the room turned thick, like heavy syrup. The pressure was immense, threatening to crush the bed beneath him. Xiaofeng couldn't even breathe. He stared at me, his face filled with genuine terror. With your current strength, I said coldly, you'll be lucky to spend the rest of your life just trying to reach the top of the Foundation stage. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. He was looking at a monster, and for the first time, he realized just how small he really was. Xiaofeng stared at me in pure shock. Against the vast ocean of my true energy, he was nothing more than a tiny leaf drifting in a storm. He couldn't resist. Even the simple act of sitting upright required every ounce of his strength. I leaned in, my voice a low, devilish whisper. Do you want to fix your broken dantian? Do you want a way to cultivate again? His eyes lit up instantly. He grabbed at the air as if trying to catch a lifeline. You have a way to fix my body. Before he had woken up, I'd noticed something strange. Even though his dantian was destroyed, his body was still instinctively absorbing the world's essence to strengthen itself. These chosen ones were built differently. Even with a shattered core and stolen roots, he was still a magnet for spiritual energy. It made me a little bitter. Life really isn't fair. The absorption rate was tiny, so small that anyone without my medical expertise would have missed it. But it gave me a bold idea. Now, I just had to figure out how to get this stubborn mule up the mountain. I do have a way, I said, watching him like a hawk. But it comes with a price. Xiaofeng didn't hesitate. His voice was firm, desperate. I don't care what the price is. As long as I can fix my body, I'll do anything. I cleared my throat. Then, would you be willing to become an unofficial disciple of my lineage? Your lineage? He looked at me, confused. Who exactly are you? I pulled back my aura and stood tall, tucking my hands behind my back with a look of calm indifference. I am Lin Yuan. The eldest disciple of the small peak, one of the 12 peaks of the Qingyun sect. He didn't even stop to think. Fine, I agree. I blinked. That fast? You're not even going to sleep on it. Xiaofeng gave a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. If you had told me earlier you were an inner sect disciple, I would have signed up immediately. People like me don't even get a chance to see the inner sect unless we break into the top 10 of the outer disciples. If someone is coming to my door to recruit me, why would I say no? You aren't worried I'm a fraud? I asked. He laughed out loud. Senior, look where we are. This is the Qingyun outer sect. Who would be brave enough to use the sect's name to scam people here? I realized he had a point. I'd forgotten how much weight the name carried. I don't actually have the authority to officially take you as a disciple yet, I clarified. We have to wait for my master to return. Until then, you'll stay at the small peak as a registered worker. He'll make the final call. Xiaofeng nodded and cupped his hands in a respectful salute. I am unworthy of such kindness. But I have to ask, why are you helping me? There's no such thing as a free lunch. What's the catch? I looked at him and shrugged. Just call it a whim. I want to see how far you can actually go. In that case, thank you, senior brother. He bowed deeply. As the words left his mouth, a notification chimed in my head. Asterisk system. Karma bond established with a child of destiny. Current task progress, April 5th. Rewards, 10 million true energy points. Idle income, 20,000 points, asterisk. I was stunned. 20,000 points for just 3 or 4 days of idling. That was huge. To be honest, I'd almost forgotten I even had a system. It was usually so quiet it felt like it was playing dead. The timing was random, the rewards varied, and compared to my current hoard of 900 million points, I didn't pay much attention to the daily drops anymore. But that progress bar caught my eye. I let out a long sigh of relief. Finally, 4/5 of the way there. The system was incredibly picky about who counted as a child of destiny. Even Hu Tu, with her nine-tailed fox bloodline, didn't trigger the count. The other 3 points came from the monsters back on my mountain. Lung Qingsong, whom I'd raised since he was a kid, Chen Changsheng, who sought me out, and by Fei Yu, whom I'd basically kidnapped while traveling with Master. It made me wonder, were these legendary geniuses really that common? If it weren't for the blood feud between the Demon Prince and Chen Changsheng, I might have tried to poach more talent from the other peaks. Who cared if he was a Demon Prince? The 3 brats on my mountain were all terrifying in their own right, and I had them wrapped around my finger. Only 1 slot left to finish my very first system mission. I felt a bit emotional looking at that bar. Even in a place as prestigious as the Qingyun sect, I'd only ever met one true child of destiny, like the Demon Prince. The others only ended up here because of me. These kids were rare. Finding the last one was going to take forever. Xiaofeng watched me silently, probably wondering why I was staring into space. I looked weird to him, I'm sure, but my power was real, and I could see the longing in his eyes. He wanted that strength for his revenge. I snapped out of it and smiled at him. Since you're one of us now, I need to tell you the rules of the small peak. He sat up straight, hanging on every word. Aside from me, I said, my face turning serious, there are 3 other brothers on the mountain and 1 younger sister. Remember this, on the small peak, my word is law. And most importantly, stay away from those 3 brothers of mine. Do not learn a single thing from them. Understand? Xiaofeng looked confused by my sudden bitterness, but he nodded anyway. With the talk over, I prepared to take him home. But he hesitated. Senior brother, can I borrow something? I raised an eyebrow. He hadn't even set foot on the mountain, and he was already asking for a loan. Was he going to be a headache too? I've made some friends in the outer sect over the years, he explained quickly. They helped me when I was down. I want to give them some spirit stones as a parting gift. I don't want to leave owing anyone. I relaxed. He was a man of character, repaying a drop of water with a fountain. Is that all? You scared me. I reached into my storage bag and pulled out a large, heavy crate. Here. 100 top-grade spirit stones. Use them however you need. Xiaofeng opened the crate and nearly fell over. He had never seen that many high-quality stones in his entire life. To him, it was a fortune. To me, it was just pocket change. The spirit stones I gave him were so high quality, they were practically top-tier snacks in the cultivation world. Xiaofeng looked at the crate and started waving his hands frantically. I don't need this many, senior brother. 10 would be more than enough, he stammered. I shrugged, completely unbothered. What's the big deal? If you run out, I'll just take you to the main square of Qingyun Peak, and we can dig up some more. Xiao Feng swallowed hard. He had been in the outer sect for 5 years and knew the layout of the sect perfectly, but he felt like he had just heard something illegal. He bowed deeply to me and dragged the heavy crate out of the room. He didn't worry about how he'd pay me back yet. He figured since he was following me now, he'd have plenty of chances to return the favor. Outside, the young disciple who had first brought Xiao Feng to see me was waiting. He looked a bit depressed. Are you really leaving, junior brother Xiao? Brother Xiao, thank you for taking care of me all these years, Xiao Feng said, clasping his hands. The senior brother from the small peak has accepted me. Please, take these stones as a token of my gratitude. The boy, Xiao, looked at the stones and his eyes immediately welled up with tears. He looked insulted. I didn't help you because I wanted stuff from you, he shouted. Xiao Feng nodded softly. I know our brotherhood is real. That's why I'm giving you this. I swear, if you ever need help in the future, I'll be there, even if it costs me my life. Just go? I don't want to see you right now, Xiao yelled, waving him away angrily. Xiao Feng gave a bitter smile. He knew Xiao's temper. He could be a bit sensitive and dramatic, like a young girl, but he'd cool off soon. Xiao Feng took one last long look at him. The mountains won't change, brother Xiao. I'm leaving now. Take care of yourself. Xiao kept his head turned away until Xiao Feng was out of sight. Once he was gone, the tears finally spilled over. His voice changed, becoming as clear and sweet as a nightingale. Brother Xiao, you really are a jerk, she whispered to the empty air. I met up with Xiao Feng at the foot of the mountain to take him home. Just as we started walking, a massive white paper crane fluttered down from the sky. Eldest brother, you're back, a high-pitched, childish voice chirped. It was Hututu. She hopped off the paper crane and started sniffing around me like a puppy looking for treats. Did you bring Tutu a present? I laughed and pulled a candied hawthorn stick out of my sleeve like a magic trick. Look at this. Yay, candied hawthorns. I haven't had these in forever. She grabbed the stick, gave it a happy kiss, and started spinning around in circles. Suddenly, she spotted Xiao Feng standing behind me. She froze. In an instant, she scrambled behind me, clutching my robe and peeking out with a wary expression. Eldest brother, who is that? I patted her head affectionately. This is a talented recruit I found for master. He's a registered disciple of our peak now. I turned to Xiao Feng. This is Hututu, our 5th disciple. She's young, but she's your senior sister. In the cultivation world, seniority isn't about age. It's about who joined the sect first. When people live for thousands of years, age loses its meaning. If a 30-year-old man dates a 7-year-old girl in the normal world, he's a monster. But if a 400-year-old cultivator marries a 300-year-old, nobody bats an eye. Xiao Feng bowed slightly. Xiao Feng greets senior sister. Hututu stared at him, her mouth hanging open. She even forgot to chew her candy. A bit of drool escaped, which she quickly wiped away. Whoa, I'm a senior sister? She looked like she couldn't believe it. Then, panic set in. This was her first time meeting a junior. Was she supposed to give a gift? She started frantically digging through her pockets. She found a leftover sweet potato from yesterday, some crickets she caught this morning, a wilted flower, and the candied hawthorn she had just bitten into. She looked at her candy with a pained, heartbreaking expression, then slowly held it out to him. Her lower lip trembled as if she was about to cry. Junior brother, do you want a bite? Xiao Feng looked at her puffed-out cheeks and teary eyes and almost laughed. It's okay, senior sister. I don't really like sweets. You don't. Tutu let out a massive sigh of relief. She puffed out her chest and stepped out from behind me, walking around Xiao Feng to inspect him. Now that she was a senior sister, she felt like a real grown-up. Junior brother, lean down, she commanded, waving her little hand. Xiao Feng confusedly bent over. She reached out and tucked a small white flower behind his ear. This is the prettiest flower I found today, she whispered. I was going to give it to eldest brother, but you can have it. Xiao Feng touched the flower, a genuine smile spreading across his face. Thank you, senior sister. Tutu clapped her hands, and the paper crane floated over to us. Let's go home. Third brother is cooking fish today. We hopped on, and a gentle breeze carried us to the summit. As soon as we landed, Tutu went running into the courtyard. Brothers. Eldest brother brought home a new junior brother. Xiaofeng looked around and fell in love with the place instantly. It wasn't what you'd expect from a top-tier sect. There were green tiles, a lush tree in the center, and a peaceful, rustic vibe. Bai Feiyu was lounging in a chair with a book over his face. He lifted the book, waved half-heartedly at Xiaofeng, and went back to his nap. Lung Qingsong was up on the roof, focused entirely on hammering nails. Then, Chun Chongxing stepped out of the kitchen wearing an apron, a spatula in his hand. He started to smile, but the moment he saw Xiaofeng's face, he froze. In Chongxing's mind, memories of a past life came rushing back. He saw a legendary figure standing alone against an army. The human race must never stop striving. Who says my people have no great emperor? I am Xiaofeng. Who dares step forward and die? Chongxing's heart hammered against his ribs. My God, I had brought home a monster. In his previous life, Xiaofeng was the great emperor who held back the demon race single-handedly for a decade. And now, that legend was his junior brother? Before he could process the shock, Tutu started sniffing the air. What's that burning smell? My fish, Chongxing screamed. The great emperor of the human race was important, but apparently not as important as the lunch in his frying pan. He bolted back into the kitchen. When lunch was finally served, I sat everyone down and introduced them one by one. Second brother Lung Qingsong, third brother Qin Chongxing, fourth brother Bai Feiyu, and our little sister, Hu Tutu. Xiaofeng was on his best behavior, bowing politely to each of them. Lung Qingsong just gave him a brief nod and went right back to shoveling rice into his mouth. Bai Feiyu watched Xiaofeng and shook his head. To him, our new junior brother's foundation was terrible. His blood qi was vibrant, sure, but he had absolutely no talent for the way of the sword. Meanwhile, Hu Tutu was staring at a piece of burnt fish, her little face scrunched up in misery. Only Qin Chongxing couldn't take his eyes off Xiaofeng. This was the man who had been the pillar of the human race in his past life. Back then, Chongxing could only hope for a distant glimpse of him. Now, that same legend was bowing to him with sincere respect. Life was truly strange. I noticed Chongxing's intense stare, and my heart sank. As a reincarnator, Chongxing definitely knew who Xiaofeng was. Ever since the Son of Heaven's Tao stepped through the door, Chongxing hadn't looked away once. The arrival of a new disciple didn't cause much of a stir on the peak. Everyone just went back to their usual business. But as Chongxing headed to his room to meditate, I called out to him. Chongxing, bring junior brother Xiao to my room for a moment, I said. Chongxing stiffened, his heart racing. To him, the future great emperor was an idol. Once we were behind closed doors, I scanned the two of them, my eyes eventually landing on Chongxing. Chongxing, I began. Xiaofeng's foundation was stolen. He can't cultivate normally. I've thought of a way to help him, but I need your assistance. Chongxing nodded immediately. Whatever you need, senior brother, just say the word. I relaxed. If Chongxing agreed this easily, it meant Xiaofeng's identity wasn't a threat. I flashed a smile. I heard you're pretty good with a brush and ink. Chongxing's expression soured. Senior brother, I don't want to draw those filthy things anymore. I stared at him, speechless. What are you talking about? Would I really ask you to draw something inappropriate? I'm being serious here. Was he really still hung up on those educational booklets I made him draw? I cleared my throat and got down to business. Listen to my plan. Xiaofeng's foundation was dug out and his dantian was destroyed, but for someone with his natural gifts, that isn't the end of the world. Since he can't cultivate immortality, he can walk the path of a body refiner. Xiaofeng gave a bitter laugh. Senior brother, it's not that I'm choosing that path. It's the only one left. But the techniques for body refining were lost in ancient times. I gave him a smug look. The method I'm talking about is one I came up with myself. Even if the techniques were lost, I had a reincarnated ancient sword immortal sitting in the courtyard. Seeing their confusion, I explained my idea. I want Chongxing to use Xiaofeng's body as a canvas. He'll tattoo divine beasts representing different attributes onto Xiaofeng's skin. Then, I'll grant those beasts intelligence. They will act as a substitute for his dantian, absorbing the world's spiritual energy to nourish his physical body. Xiaofeng and Chongxing were stunned. I made granting intelligence sound as easy as buying cabbage. Xiaofeng didn't realize how impossible that was, but Changxing knew. It was like asking a rock to grow legs and run away. However, Changxing had seen me do the impossible before. He still had doubts, though. Senior brother, we tried giving life to drawings before. It always triggered heavenly tribulation. The beasts were turned to ash instantly, and we suffered for it. Can we really succeed? I nodded thoughtfully. I'm not entirely sure. But I got the idea from the sect leader's paper cranes and those stone lions I accidentally brought to life. In the past, the beasts failed because they had no physical bodies to endure the lightning. But if they are tattooed onto Xiaofeng, they share his body. With a physical vessel, maybe they can survive the tribulation. It was a bold, dangerous gamble. In a heavenly tribulation, you either survive or you're erased from existence. There was no third option. No, Changxing said firmly. The theory is fine, but if it fails, Xiaofeng dies. There's no coming back from that. I want to try, Xiaofeng interrupted. He had gone from a peerless genius to a useless scrap. He hadn't felt spiritual energy since his dantian was destroyed. Even if the energy naturally nourished his muscles during exercise, he couldn't perceive it. He would rather die trying than live like this. No, I won't gamble with your life, Changxing refused again. He couldn't let the future hero of humanity die by his hand. Xiaofeng suddenly dropped to his knees. Third brother, a man only kneels to heaven, his parents, and his teacher. But if you do this for me, it will be like giving me a second life. Changxing looked at the future great emperor begging at his feet and felt a pang of guilt. I stayed quiet. My idea was wild and untested. I was essentially betting on Xiaofeng's status as a protagonist to survive. I couldn't force him to go to his death. The room went silent. Changxing couldn't make up his mind. Suddenly, the door pushed open. Bai Feiyu walked in with a smile. I've actually heard of an ancient body refining method. Senior brother's idea isn't without precedent. I grinned. Having an ancient reincarnator in the house was great. They always showed up with the right techniques at the right time. I ignored the fact that he was eavesdropping and grabbed his shoulder. Xiaobai, you have a technique? Bai Feiyu nodded. Back when I was a mortal, I met an old beggar. He told me about ancient masters who used the souls of ferocious beasts as vessels to temper their bodies. It's exactly what Senior Brother is suggesting. An old beggar? I rolled my eyes internally. That was the most cliché protagonist trope in the book. I stared at Bai Feiyu, my face blank. An old beggar? It was the ultimate cliché. I wanted to laugh, but the seriousness in his eyes stopped me. A vagrant gave you a secret technique? I asked, my voice flat. And you're telling me you just understood him? Bai Feiyu chuckled. He explained that to any normal person, the man's ramblings sounded like pure nonsense. Most people simply couldn't understand a word the man said. They saw a crazy hobo, but Bai Feiyu saw a path to power. I shook my head. It figured. In a world full of monsters and immortals, the local beggar was the most reliable source for forbidden knowledge. So the vagrant was a hidden master, I muttered. Xiaofeng didn't care about the source. He didn't care if the technique came from a king or a beggar. He just looked at me, his eyes pleading for a chance to start over. I looked at the protagonist tag hovering over his head. It was time to stop worrying and start building a legend. All right, I said, clapping my hands together. If the sword immortal can translate hobo speak, then we have a plan.